Chapter 29. The scene was very strange. Surrounded by a group of brightly dressed people, a youngster dressed in coarse sackcloth received the arcane badge representing honor and status from the hands of the kingdom's strongest wizard, Mediv. Such a huge contrast made those aristocratic magic apprentices extremely dazzled. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over, but etiquette didn't allow them to lower their heads. Otherwise, not only would it be contempt for Duque, it would also be disrespectful to the Mediv who issued the badge. At this time, applause rang in the surroundings. Whether it was heartfelt blessings or envy, jealousy, and hatred for Duque to go to hell, at least the applause was very warm. Congratulations, Sir Marcus. Congratulations, congratulations. The sounds of flattery rang out incessantly. After becoming an official wizard, the treatment they received was naturally different. Practically everyone had a smile on their face. It was as if the questioning and even the insults from a moment ago were just Duque's hallucination. Duque, you are still young. The world of adults is sometimes so terrible. You just have to get used to it. Mediv smiled warmly at Duque. Very naturally, a clever attendant had already delivered a wine cup filled with fine wine. Originally, this was supposed to be a celebration of the birth of the Royal Magic Academy's chief apprentice. Now that it was brought, the standard was a bit lacking, but the timing was just right. When Duque mechanically picked up the wine cup, Mediv took the initiative to touch his cup with Duque's, and then downed his wine in one gulp. As a senior, as a highly respected court grand wizard, Mediv's appreciation of Duque fell into the eyes of everyone in the surroundings. This was an honor that mortals could only dream of but not reach. Ladies and gentlemen, I still have a lot of things to do, so I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, Mediv left in a carefree manner. As a court grand wizard highly regarded by the king, at this moment, Mediv still performed his duty of assisting the king. In Duque's timeline, Mediv was the busiest and most active at this time. He just didn't know whether the Mediv just now was Sardra's, or Mediv's own will, or Mediv's will under Sardra's mental suggestion. After all, having two souls in one body was the most complicated. However, does this count as running away after acting cool? How exciting! Or could it be that this is more exciting because the boss is forced to run away after acting cool in front of me? Thinking of this, the blood in Duque's body began to boil. He did not expect that he would one day use a supervillain boss as his shield. Duque suddenly realized that he seemed to have awakened some kind of evil attribute that pursued excitement. What happened next had nothing to do with Duque. A guy who looked like a host came up and announced, "All right, now it's time for the apprentice and the mentor to choose. According to the Academy's regulations, the mentors who must recruit magic apprentices this year are." The host rambled on and on about a lot of things that had nothing to do with Duque. In fact, this two-way choice reminded Duque of the talent market. Unfortunately, Duque had even rejected Mediv, so naturally, there would not be any mages who would stick their warm faces to their butts. In previous years, there seemed to be a chief magic apprentice award ceremony or something. Now that Duque, the chief apprentice, had directly become an earth mage, this step was saved. The biggest limelight was stolen by Duque, and the rest of the apprentices and mages would not ask for a snub. Soon, they dispersed like birds and beasts. It was only then that Darnielle and Itana, who came with Duque, came up. Congratulations, Duque, Sir Marcus. The ones who spoke were Darnielle and Itana, who did not dare to look Duque in the eye. Call me Duque. Darnielle seemed a little hesitant, but he still said straightforwardly, Duque. We've discussed it with Mentor Norton and decided to become his disciple. Suddenly, Itana looked up. This freckled little girl seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage. Duque, why don't we beg Mentor Norton together? After all, he was the one who unearthed you. Duque raised a finger and stopped Itana from continuing. Duque thought to himself, if old man Norton dared to accept me, he would have come long ago. I wonder if it's because I'm old and have become timid. He did not blame old man Norton. After all, not everyone had the aptitude and luck to become a hero. However, it was precisely the struggle of a myriad of mortals against fate that created numerous epic events. Everyone has their own standpoint. Besides, the path I'm taking is very different from yours. Learn well from Mentor Norton. If there's anything good, I'll take care of you. The two youngsters nodded, not really understanding. Everyone dispersed. Duque asked the attendant for the location, and under the attendant's guidance, he walked through the long marble corridor. Under the gaze of countless people in the paintings, he still knocked on Old Man Norton's door. The one who opened the door was the ordinary second-year female apprentice called Sasha. Seeing Duque outside the door, this female apprentice with flaxen hair and light brown eyes revealed a kind smile. She said to Duke in a low voice, "You really did come. Actually, Mentor has been hoping for you to come." Mentor. He's not a bad person, he just has too many concerns. After saying that quickly, Sasha said loudly, "Welcome, Your Excellency Duke Marcus. Mentor is free. You can go in yourself." Duque nodded with a smile, and walked in with his head held high. Perhaps it was only a temporary room for recruiting apprentices. The room was quite different from what Duque had imagined. To be precise, it was not a room for a sorcerer, but more like a guest room for a noble. There was nothing on the white rectangular oak table, only the gorgeous golden curved edges of the table that were filled with all kinds of arcs could be seen. In front of the table, there was a chair with a red velvet background, which allowed apprentices to sit comfortably and communicate with their mentor. The mentor's chair was a little dazzling, because there were two crystal balls infused with arcane energy on the chair, emitting a gentle glow. It was probably to announce the field that Mentor Norton was good at, arcane. However, Old Man Norton was not sitting on the chair. On the contrary, he was looking out of the room's large floor-to-ceiling window with his back to the door. Looking at the greenery everywhere in the academy, the old man seemed to be sighing. "I'm sorry to have caused you trouble," Duque said first. "Sigh." The old man sighed. "Although you have been in trouble since the first time I saw you, I still did not expect you to cause so much trouble. Do you regret it?" Duque asked with a smile. "If I really regretted it, I wouldn't even let you into this room." "Then I've decided to take a gamble." Chapter 30. No one knew what Duque had gotten from Old Mage Norton, but soon, half of the mages in the academy knew that Old Man Norton had gotten a High Elven Mage Apprentice Handbook from the royal family of Kuel Salas, and that it had been used by Kale, that Sunstrider. This gave everyone more ideas about Duque's background. Duque did not care so much. He stayed in the guest house of the Magic Academy for the night. Miraculously, on that night, he received a letter from Aurelia. This was a very Windrunner letter, because the letter was sent by a skylark. There was a note tied to its long leg, and on it was written in the common human language. "Congratulations. Your Excellency Mage Duke Marcus." Duque scratched his head. He could not understand why this skylark could do the work of a carrier pigeon, and would come to his window in the middle of the night to wake him up. Could this skylark have become a spirit? Duque muttered to himself. He did not know when or where Aurelia had received his message, but this strange High Elven ranger knew about it and even sent a kind blessing. Looking at the line of delicate words, Duque felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. It seems that I have really clung to the golden thigh of Aurelia. That being said, Duque was also happy to have a good relationship with Aurelia, so he quickly replied with the help of the system. "Thank you for your congratulations. I think we will still have a chance to meet in a few years." After writing, he read the note 3 times to make sure that there was no mistake. Duque stuffed the note into the small tube on the skylark's leg. Go back to your master." After doing this, Duque fell asleep soundly. He had no idea that a few hours later, Aurelia had received his reply, and there had been a small accident. In a vast and boundless forest, the first ray of light was shining through the dense leaves. Aurelia, who had just woken up from the tree, looked at the skylark with a strange expression. "Chirp chirp chirp chirp. Skylark reported to Windrunner in a melodious voice. What? He said you became a spirit? Well, this kid has quite a good eye. Chirp 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 chirp, what? That perverted rascal wants to hug my thigh? Aurelia's eyes widened in disbelief. Who knew that Skylark would use her wings to pat her beautiful legs? Aurelia couldn't help but look at her perfect long legs, and in the next moment, her pretty face blushed for no reason. That was because she thought of the scene where Duque, that little rascal, had cast his gaze on her peak several times. She fiercely gritted her teeth. That little perverted rascal, he really doesn't hide his thoughts. If there's a chance, I must teach him how to respect his elders. Inexplicably, at the same time, Duque sneezed. Huh, what the hell? Did I catch a cold? Duque still didn't know that because of his soliloquy, he had been tricked by Skylark. After washing up, Duque put on a set of blue and white mage robes with gold trim. This was a small gift from Old Mage Norton. According to Old Man Norton, if he wore the coarse linen shirt and the mage badge on the streets of Stormwind City, it would be a disgrace to all mages. After dressing neatly, looking at himself in the big mirror in the room, Duque suddenly felt that the clothes make the man. Originally a college student, Duque put on a mage robe. Although he felt that it was cumbersome, he looked like a scholar and really had a scholarly temperament. He already had a plan in mind, and just as he was about to implement it, Duque was stunned as soon as he opened the door. In the guest room outside the door, he saw 3 Stormwind City soldiers standing as straight as javelins. The 2 behind them were fully armed guards, and the heroic middle-aged knight in the middle was wearing a ceremonial robe with blue patterns on a white background. There was a golden shoulder ornament like a sword tassel on his shoulder. His brown hair was neatly combed, and even an ant couldn't climb on it. The knight lightly hit the left side of his chest with his right fist and bowed. Hello, respected Sir Earth Mage Duke Marcus. I am Garcia Rodi, the commander of the Stormwind City Garrison Army's 3rd Regiment. I bring greetings from Stormwind City's commander, Anduin Lothar. Lothar looking for me? Duque was very polite. Hello, I am Duque. May I ask why Commander Lothar is looking for me? It's like this. The great King Lang and Commander Lothar found out that you are the 2nd youngest official mage in Stormwind City's history, and that you are willing to join the kingdom's mage corps. Both His Majesty and Commander Lothar are very happy. Therefore, they have asked me to bring greetings from King Lang and Commander Lothar. Duque nodded. Yes, thank them for their concern. Thank them for me. Garcia smiled and waved his hand. Immediately, a group of attendants outside the guest room filed in. This is the letter of appointment for the official mage corps signed by His Majesty himself. Every autumn, there will be a welcoming ceremony hosted by His Majesty for the official members of the mage corps. This is His Majesty's consolation money for you, 100 Arathar gold coins. I heard that Sir Marcus came from the pioneer settlement outside the Elven Forest. Therefore, His Majesty has specially rewarded you with a house. He has also provided you with 2 servants. If you are not satisfied with the servants, you can let me know. I am authorized to satisfy your needs to the greatest extent. Indeed, King Lang was a wise monarch. He was very clear about the value of talents. For a talented young mage from a commoner background, he definitely valued him. Seeing the undisguised envy in Garcia's eyes, Duque immediately knew that even for a new official mage, this was a reward that was above average. In the eyes of Duque, who was most in need of money, this was no different from a timely rain. It was equivalent to the first bucket of gold to push forward Duque's next plan. Once again, thank His Majesty for the reward, said Duque as he flipped through the list that Garcia handed over. This is, Garcia hurriedly explained, official mages are the kingdom's important talents. Every mage should have sufficient protection when they go out. Therefore, these are the follower candidates that His Majesty Lothar has carefully selected for you. Every one of them is absolutely loyal to the kingdom, and their combat skills are also quite good. According to Sir Marcus's rank, you can choose up to 2 knight candidates as your exclusive followers. Duque could not help but laugh. As a PvP maniac in the game, he never thought that there would come a day when a mage who fought so fiercely would need a bodyguard. Since he had transmigrated, he would do as the Romans do. As he flipped through the list, a name suddenly made Duque's heart jump violently. Reginald Windsor. Chapter 31. At this point in time, Reginald Windsor was just an ordinary young soldier, a knight candidate. He was no different from the thousands of soldiers under Anduin Lothar who had yet to experience a real war and could be killed instantly by the orcs' axes. Even in the future, Reginald wouldn't be someone with an insane amount of power. He would be able to deal with ordinary experts, but even if he were to fight against a real hero, he would be killed in one move, let alone a fierce person like a tribal chief. He did not have outstanding leadership skills, and he did not have any outstanding achievements in the world of Warcraft before Duque traveled to this world. Even his promotion was the result of hard work. However, Reginald Windsor became the Marshal. After his death, he was crowned a hero by the people, the soldiers, and the players. Why? Because of his unlimited loyalty to Stormwind City, the largest human kingdom on the continent. This was the story of a few decades later. One day, the king of Stormwind Kingdom mysteriously disappeared. Windsor found that the nobles in Stormwind City had undergone a strange change. They began to indulge in pleasure and no longer cared about the other Stormwind Kingdom territories other than Stormwind City. As a result, people were forced to fend for themselves. In the Westfall, Jirian Stroman formed the Westfall People's Army, while in the Twilight Forest, Duke Ebenlock formed his Night's Watch to protect the people of the Night Town alone. Windsor couldn't sit still when the Blackrock Beast men were closing in on the burning steps to the north of Lakeside Town, and there were even rumors of a black dragon appearing. He thought of his mission and took the initiative to request to go to the burning steps to lead the alliance against the Blackrock Beast men and the Black Dragon. However, Countess Katrana Presto, who had a great influence in the council, firmly opposed his proposal. The Countess's influence even swayed the decision of the regent, Bolvar Fordragon. After completely falling out with the Duchess, he went alone to the Alliance camp in the Burning Steppes. In fact, he was exiled by Stormwind City, to preside over the battle against the Blackrock Orcs. However, Stormwind City never sent any reinforcements to the Burning Steppes, and Marshal Windsor was captured by the Dark Iron Dwarves in an ambush. The Marshal could only deduce the cause and effect of everything alone in the prison. After connecting all the causes and effects, he found the biggest suspicious point was the Countess Katrana Presto who mysteriously appeared in Stormwind City on the eve of the king's disappearance. However, he had no proof. When we found Marshal Windsor in the Iron Jail, he refused to come out, and cursed the Duke of Bolvar Fordragon for being a perfect fool. In fact, now that everything had been sorted out, it was actually safer to stay in the Dark Iron Dwarves prison. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to uncover the Black Dragon's conspiracy before he died. When Duque and the players found a mysterious note in the Blackrock Abyss and handed it to Marshal Windsor, he became excited. He saw hope. He had found proof. This was the hope to break the mystery. He had the players get the 2 stone slabs and rushed out of the prison. He wanted to go to Stormwind City, for the sake of Stormwind, for the sake of the Alliance, and expose the true face of Countess Katrana Presto. He entered Stormwind City, and under the witness of the 5 heroes of the Second War, he gained the trust of his former friend. Along the way, all the soldiers knelt on one knee and saluted him. He entered Stormwind Stronghold and used the stone slabs he obtained from the Dark Iron Dwarves to force out the true face of Countess Katrana Presto, the princess of the Black Dragon, Onyxia. The enraged Black Dragon gave Marshal Windsor a fatal blow before flying away. Bolvar Fordragon, who had regained consciousness, single-handedly destroyed the Black Dragon guards who had taken human form around him. But none of this could save Marshal Windsor's life. A hero had finally reached the end of his life. He faced his fate with a smile and was fearless. Recalling the tear-jerking history in the game, Duque couldn't help but feel lost and thoughtful. Turning his head to look out the window, the first rays of dawn seemed to have just brushed past the tips of Duque's hair. It had only been a few days since he transmigrated, but Duque felt that this period of time had been spent in urgency and unease. Duque suddenly smiled. He used to think that if he could hear the names of Stormwind City, Karazhan, and the Dark Portal from the Warcraft movies, and hear these memorable lines, he would be very happy and satisfied. Because in those countless days and nights, he had measured every inch of the land with the feet of a silly wizard named Little Demon Feifei. Even if time flew, and this once world's #1 game could no longer keep up with the times, and was mocked by younger players for being outdated, he still loved her. Every night, he would dream of her. When he couldn't sleep, he didn't look at the moon outside the window. Instead, he logged into the game, sat on his favorite pure white griffin, flew into the sky, and looked down at this beautiful continent. He used to think that the box office of the Warcraft movies was not good, and that there would be no more sequels. Not only did he buy 10 or 20 movie tickets, but he also organized a group with his childhood friends to watch the movie. Because she was with me for such a long and beautiful time, he used to think that this was the best way to protect her. But now, I have found a better way to protect her, Duque muttered to himself. He raised his head and looked at the rising sun. Duque knew very well that he couldn't fight against Sardras, who had obtained Mediva's body and a huge amount of guardian magic. Even if all the forces on the continent joined forces, they might not be able to do it. The opening of the dark portal was irreversible. The sun shone on Duque's face. It was warm, and Duque felt the pulse of fate again. The sun would rise day after day, and the only thing he could control was the progress of fate after the opening of the dark portal. At this point, Duque took a deep breath and waved the name list in his hand. He pointed at Reginald Windsor's name. "Hello, Captain Kasia. I want him." Him? Kasia's expression was a little strange. Of course, the strange reason came from Duque. He noticed that Duque's reaction became very intense when he saw Windsor's name. "Is there a problem?" Duque asked. Since his name is on the list, it means that Sir Lothar thinks that he is a reliable and capable young man. I don't have a problem. I'm just curious why you chose him." Duque smiled and said, "Because I feel the fetters of fate." Chapter 32. Fate's fetters, in other words, were metaphysics and luck. This wasn't really a reason, so it could only be attributed to unreliable intuition. In the end, Captain Garcia didn't probe further. Since Duke was so obedient and he was doing things within the scope that Lothar had given him, there was nothing much to say. After some small talk, he gave Duke a guarantee. "Mr. Reginald Windsor will appear before you in an hour, Your Excellency." A true soldier would definitely be very disciplined. None of the soldiers trained in Stormwind City were useless. When Duque saw Windsor in the guest room, Duque couldn't help but laugh. He said he obeyed, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. The only thing missing was the words, "I hate you," engraved on his forehead. In the game, Duque could only see a gamified uncle. But when he saw Windsor in person, Duque felt that the marshal was once young. He was quite cute. Even though the marshal still had the blonde crew cut, he was still very old. How much beard could a 14-year-old boy have? A full beard was out of the question. The beard under his eagle nose was a faint golden mark. Plus his square mouth, distinctive golden eyebrows, and purposely stiffened facial muscles, he looked like a poker face. The only thing that satisfied Duque was Windsor's muscles. His bulging biceps and thick thighs were full of explosive power. With those muscles, he could probably fight 10 Duque at once. Of course, compared to an adult orc whose arms were thicker than a human's thigh, Windsor was still at a disadvantage in terms of strength. Duque smiled and said, "Why? Windsor, are you not satisfied with becoming my follower?" It was obvious that Windsor was a typical soldier. He was straightforward and didn't bother to hide his thoughts at all. "Yes. My dream is to become a glorious warrior of Stormwind City and fight on the front lines to protect the kingdom. I don't want to be a personal guard, even if it's a powerful Sir Wizard. Plus, I don't think you're strong." As soon as Windsor finished speaking, Duque made his move. Calm and composed, allowed the next spell to be cast instantly. Frost Arrow taught the future Marshal Windsor how to be a man. Ah! The maximized Frost Arrow stunned Windsor, who was in full armor. The sturdy armor could not stop the cold air from invading his chest. If Duque hadn't held back, Windsor might have been left with a lingering illness. Several minutes later, in front of the only stove in the School of Magic, Windsor covered himself with a blanket and said, "All right, I apologize for saying, sir, you're not strong. I accept your apology." Duque smiled and handed a cup of ginger tea to Windsor. Windsor, who had begun to acknowledge Duque, was no longer as stiff as before. "However, I still believe that becoming your follower is in conflict with my dream." "What exactly is your dream? Have you thought about it?" Windsor was a little confused. Didn't he already say what his dream was? Duque continued, "Actually, our dream is the same, to fight for the rise of Stormwind." Windsor's body trembled. "Do you see the shining lion emblem on your chest?" Following Duque's words, Windsor lowered his head. Duke opened his mouth and spoke tirelessly. "In the past, in order to deal with the threat of the trolls, Thoradin the Great united all the human tribes and established the Great Arather Empire. Humans began to spread all over the continent, and new cities were built one after another. However, as it became more and more prosperous, its most powerful core began to fall apart. The lords of Riptide City began to gradually move their wealth to the prosperous northern region of Lordaeron, abandoning the barren south. Even Thoradin the Great's heir, the last child of the Arather bloodline, was left behind in the crumbling walls of Riptide City. After many long years, a team of knights finally arrived in the Valley of the Kings. A man raised his sword in front of the knights and said, "I swear on my sword that Stormwind will bear the glory of the Arather Empire and sweep away all oppression and injustice. My people, my subjects, will follow Thoradin the Great's oath and continue to advance along the path of prosperity for humanity. If one day, decay and lack of progress blinds the eyes of our descendants, then let Stormwind be destroyed in despair." 1,200 years ago, the lion flag of Stormwind was raised in this great valley. It reflected the rising sun of that day. But Windsor, tell me, why is it that 1,200 years later, Stormwind's territory is still dominated by the elven forest? Why is the western wilderness followed by the word wilderness? Why does the Reedridge Mountain have the word barren in it? Windsor, for whom are you drawing your sword? Isn't it for the future, for tomorrow, for our descendants, for them to have a wider living space, to not live under the shadow of monsters and all kinds of external threats? What Stormwind needs the most is not simple-minded soldiers, but a pioneer. Windsor, answer me. Are you willing to accompany me to be a pioneer? Windsor's mouth trembled. It was obvious that his immature mind was beginning to waver under the bluff of this transmigrator, Duque. However, there was still an abnormal persistence in his heart. "Sir Marcus, I demand that you show me your plan, the complete plan." Windsor was sitting up. His blue eyes were filled with hesitation, and there was an uncompromising sense of helplessness. "I'll show you." 15 minutes later, Duque brought Windsor to the pier of Stormwind City. Ships. From the moment he decided to develop in Stormwind City, Duque thought of ships. He could not forget that in the Warcraft movies, the Stormwind City guards in bright armor were drowned by the green sea of orcs. In complex terrain, the orcs, who had the absolute advantage in both strength and agility, were invincible. The ravines and dangerous areas that humans thought were impassable were nothing to the orcs, who were used to harsh environments. According to history, Duque was not optimistic about Stormwind City at all. If he had transmigrated into King Lang's body, he might have been saved. Unfortunately, he was not. He only had the identity of a commoner. Even with the help of the system elf, what Duque could do was still limited. That was why Duque thought of ships. Ships were needed for both retreat and future counterattacks. Chapter 33. The dock in front of him was narrow and messy. Everywhere was filled with noise and the strong smell of fish. Windsor could not help but frown. If not for the occasional fish in their meals, Windsor would not have known that Stormwind City had a dock dedicated to fishermen. The not-so-wide wooden pier extended from the sandy shore to within 40 paces of the water's edge. All he could see were small fishing boats. Many of the wooden boards on the dock had rotted, and there were many holes in them. Stepping on them not only made dangerous squeaking sounds, but one could also twist their foot if they were not careful. There was only a slightly larger stone dock in the distance. That was one of the few naval ports in Stormwind City that belonged to the Royal Navy. The size of the Royal Navy was slightly better than the Mongolian Navy. In any case, they were the kind of people who would be laughed at if they dared to say, "My journey is the Sea of Stars." 3 medium-sized armed sail-class battleships. This was the entire Stormwind Kingdom's navy right now. Although they were well maintained, Duque could even see that the paint on the ships was freshly swept. There were even new recruits painting the plywood under the supervision of officers. But the impression it gave Duque was still weak. Too weak. In Duke's mind, he could not help but imagine such a scene. The endless number of orcs were like a huge green wave, roaring through every street in Stormwind City. The storm chariots in the middle of the road fought back bravely, but in front of the absolute power of the orc infantry, every line of defense was like paper. If they could not retreat in time, they would immediately be engulfed by the tide of orcs and crushed into dust. The tall and incomparably strong orcs created one terrifying earthquake after another. The Trade District, the Mage District, Stormwind Stronghold. All the buildings were easily destroyed and collapsed like dominoes. All the humans were either captured by the orcs or sacrificed to Stormwind City. All the land routes had been blocked by the orc army, and the only escape route in Stormwind was the sea. Kul Tiras, one of the 7 kingdoms of the humans, had sent a huge fleet to help Stormwind evacuate its citizens and troops, but due to the small size of the dock, they were unable to increase the speed of their retreat. This was the first major disaster in the history of the world of Azeroth in 1,000 years, all because of a bad dock. Therefore, after Storm City was rebuilt for the second time, Storm City gained a huge dual-use port, Storm Port. However, right now, this was just a fisherman's wharf that wasn't even marked on the city's map. Duque was disappointed. Not to mention the fact that he couldn't get a boat in such a short time. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it because the dock was too small. Also, it was a problem for him to have too many ships. You're just a little magician. What are you trying to do with a fleet that's even more ridiculous than the royal fleet? There must be a suitable reason. In his mind, Duque quickly adjusted his plan. Go. We'll go to the shipyard first. With a doubtful Windsor in tow, Duque arrived at the small shipyard beside Stormwind's dock. The shipyard wasn't big. A bare-chested old man with a hunched back that showed no signs of aging saw Duque walk over. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted and bowed. After all, a young magician with a magician's robe and an official magician's insignia, and a young knight in military uniform, such a combination was definitely rare in this place. Good morning, respected Sir Magician. May I ask how Jackson can help you? How big of a ship can you build here? I mean the biggest. Duque directly pointed at the royal fleet docked in the military port. Can you build that big? Old Jackson was stunned for a moment, and immediately smiled bitterly. How is that possible? Even the Stormwind warships are custom-built from Kul Tiras. We can only build fishing boats or cargo ships that are a few dozen tons. That's good. I want 10. Duque decided on the spot. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. Not just old Jackson, even Windsor who followed him was dumbfounded. Wait. Windsor dragged Duckla out of the shipyard and to a place where no one was around. Sir Marcus, the money is yours. I have no intention of asking you how you use it. But if you are going to invest in shipbuilding, then even if I am just a knight candidate who wholeheartedly practices martial arts, I must warn you that you are going to lose. Oh. A thought-provoking expression appeared on Duque's face. Why do you say that? For the sake of the wise His Majesty Lang, please dispel this terrible idea. I know that your profession as a wizard requires a lot of money, and I also know that most of the existing money-making industries in Stormwind City are occupied by aristocrats, but you can't waste money on ships. Windsor waved his arms exaggeratedly, using his body language to express the seriousness of the matter. Go on. Only the poor are willing to eat fishy and smelly fish, aristocrats don't eat it at all. Similarly, there is no point in building a small cargo ship of several dozen tons. There is not even a decent town in the coastal waters where such a small ship can go. Who are you going to sell the goods to? As long as you leave the coastal waters, there will be damn Nagas and fishmen everywhere. Duque still smiled without saying anything. Windsor became more and more anxious. It's not that no merchant ships will come. In fact, only the Kultira's merchant fleet comes once a year, and they stop at the military port. They come to dump the goods of Lordaeron that cannot be sold elsewhere to Stormwind City's aristocrats. When Duque heard this, he immediately understood. At this moment, Stormwind was still a poor and remote place in the eyes of the continent's major human kingdom's aristocrats. In fact, if it were not for the various invasions in later generations, as well as the undead Scourge Legion that almost destroyed the human kingdoms north of Stormwind City, who would have expected that Stormwind City would become the strongest and safest shelter for humans? Duque. Listen to me, unless you can earn the money of those aristocrats, no side business will be able to satisfy the money you need to practice magic. This is also why so many mages become court mages or exclusive mages of the aristocrats. Duque suddenly smiled brightly. Windsor, why don't we make a bet? Bet again? You're going to lose so much money. Indeed, whether it is for my personal training or the needs of development, I need a lot of money. Then let's bet on whether I can earn 500 gold coins in 3 months or not. If I can't, then it will prove my level, and I will let you go back to Lothar as your knight candidate. Windsor suddenly had an ominous feeling. What if you win? First of all, I will call you Reggie from now on. Your name is too long and troublesome. Then, you will follow me from now on. I will tell you who is the hope and future of Stormwind. Chapter 34. Old Jackson, it's still the same, I want 10 of them to meet the standards for offshore transportation and fishing. As big as you can make them, when can I get them? Duque's words gave old Jackson a shock. He did not expect that this young mage who seemed to have never seen the world really wanted to build a ship. It would be a waste not to take the money that was delivered to his doorstep. Old Jackson sighed, I don't have that much material here, I only have 5 keels for new ships. Any more and I will have to spend time looking for materials. If you only need 5 new 30-ton ships, I can guarantee that they will be ready for you within a month. Each one will cost 50 gold coins. A 30-ton ship was actually very small, converting to the size that Duque was familiar with. It was only 15 meters long and 3 meters wide. It was only slightly bigger than a dinghy. All right, it's settled. Here's the deposit. After saying that, Duque immediately took out the 100 gold coins that Lothar gave him in the morning. There's no need for that much, if it's you, Sir Mage, we only need a 10% deposit. Then help me recruit some sailors for the rest. Old Jackson's wrinkled face showed a hesitant expression. He bit his lips and finally spoke. There are plenty of lads at the dock who have nothing better to do. It's not impossible for me to help you recruit some. They are all good lads, even though they are good swimmers and have good character, they are not sailors. I can't agree to let them do high-risk business. Duque smiled confidently. It's fine, I'm just fishing and transporting some goods that are presentable. On the contrary, I hope that the lads I recruit will be clean, if I find out that anyone dares to hide some goods. Calm and composed, Flame Blast, a fireball the size of a water tank formed in Duque's hands in an instant, flew out and exploded in the sea beside the shipyard. Accompanied by a loud boom, a large pillar of water exploded. Windsor, who was at the side, was completely petrified. Duque actually held back this morning. If such a large fireball hit me, wouldn't I turn into charcoal in an instant? The people on the boat, including old Jackson, all had their legs shaking and trembling non-stop. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to threaten you. But what I'm about to do next is really important. I don't want any bad fellas among my men." Duque nodded and left with Windsor. Duque did not return to the house that Lothar gave him. Instead, he went to the guest house of the magic school and borrowed a pen and paper from old Norton. Spreading out the A2-sized piece of paper on the table, Duque picked up the quill that needed to be dipped in ink to write and activated the system assist. The system notification rang. Beep. Descriptive geometry and the drawing software AutoCAD have been detected in the host's memory. System optimization and sorting. Drawing assistance function completed. Under Windsor's astonished gaze, Duque used less than 10 minutes to draw a profile of the ship and handed it to Windsor. "Keep this blueprint well. This is 500 gold coins for travel expenses. I need you to make a trip to Kul Tiras. Bring the entire family of the craftsmen who are capable of building a ship of this level back to Stormwind City. If I'm not back by then, place him in the house that Sir Lothar gave me." Windsor wouldn't be able to understand the blueprints. But he could barely recognize the name of the original owner of the gold note that was recognized by the Seven Kingdoms and could be exchanged in the main cities of the Seven Kingdoms was the venerable old wizard Norton. "Hiss," Windsor gasped. It turned out that whether he was there or not, Duque was going to do something big. Windsor asked, "Then what are you going to do during this time, Sir Marcus?" "Of course I'm going to level up." "Oh, it's to practice magic. At the same time, I'm going to make preparations for this investment." The world of wizards was not something a soldier could meddle in. Despite his doubts, Windsor was grateful for Duque's trust in him. After all, in his opinion, 500 gold coins was already a huge sum of money. After all, this amount of money was enough for a small family to live a lifetime of prosperity. Unexpectedly, Duque did not even ask a single question and directly handed him this huge sum of money. "Well, please rest assured that I, Reginald Windsor, will not let you down." On this side, Duque hurriedly returned to his home in Stormwind City and left Stormwind City. Lothar really valued him. His home was located in the garden area. According to the standards of the pre-transmigration era, it was already a villa. At least there were 2 small gardens of about 10 square meters in front and 1 at the back. Before the transmigration, if this was in a first-tier city, it would definitely be an expensive property worth millions. But in Stormwind City, compared to the mansions of those nobles, this was really a very ordinary standard. Duque did not feel at ease here. Since it was a house that was destined to be destroyed by the flames of war, there was no need to worry about it. However, Duque's investment, in a very short time, reached the ears of another group of interested people. When Fame Brando heard the news of Duque's investment in shipbuilding, he laughed on the spot. "That idiot actually built a ship. Stormwind City has no specialties to sell at all. We collect so much tax every year, but we can only be at the mercy of those profiteers, Kul Tiras, or the even more damned goblins. All right, I'll see Duke lose so much that he doesn't even have his pants left." The Brando family were not stupid. When Lothar vaguely asked the Brando family about their feud with Duque, the Brando family sternly warned Fame Brando. "Before you understand the situation clearly, you are forbidden from contacting that Duque in any form, whether directly or indirectly. Otherwise, if you offend Lothar, the entire Brando family will be destroyed." For the time being, they could not do anything to Duque, but it did not mean that they could not curse Duque in the worst way possible. In fact, it was not only Brando, even in the Academy of Magic, there were many mages who looked at Duque's actions with disdain. From their point of view, for a noble mage to personally run a business was a disgrace to the profession of a mage. Even the most neutral mage would feel that Duque was not doing his proper work, and was wasting his talent and time. After all, the ocean of magic was so vast, and the human lifespan was too short compared to the amount of time needed to spend in the field of magic. But these things, Duque did not care. After hiring a carriage and a team of mercenaries, Duque spent a full 5 days crossing the elven forest, and arrived at the western wilderness, southwest of Stormwind City. Western Wilderness. I'm coming. Chapter 35. After exiting Stormwind City, heading south, crossing Mirror Lake and West Spring Stronghold, and turning west was the boundary of the Western Wilderness. Sitting in the bumpy carriage, Duque gazed at the scenery outside the window. Outside the window was an eternally clear sky. Even the wind carried a sense of desolation. His vision was filled with yellow soil, yellow fields, and yellow earth. The Western Wilderness had the same comfortable temperature as Aylwin, but the strong winds from the sea and twilight forest kept blowing past. If not for the plump grains in the fields, Duque would have thought this was a barren land. In fact, perhaps due to the underground river, the land here was quite fertile. Unfortunately, there were many terrible monsters in the Western Wilderness, and the one that annoyed Duque the most was the vultures that filled the sky. He saw with his own eyes that a mercenary he used as a token guard was attacked. A black shadow flashed across the sky, drawing a line of death in the air. In the blink of an eye, the shadow of death descended from the sky. It was foreseeable that in a few seconds, the back of the young mercenary's head would explode into a rotten watermelon. The young mercenary's equipment was decent. He wore a standard metal helmet that the Stormwind City guards had abandoned. However, such a ferocious attack was not something an unprepared recruit could defend against. The impact alone was enough to break his cervical vertebrae. It was not hard to imagine that he would die in an instant. At that moment, the entire caravan froze in fear. At least 6 or 7 mercenaries who witnessed the scene were horrified. Their leader, Makarov, was even more horrified. However, the vultures were so fast that they did not even have time to pull out their bows and arrows. At this critical moment, a hand reached out from the window of the carriage. Duque's hand. That's right, it was the combination of calm mind and flame blast. This move was more than enough to beat up ordinary soldiers and humans. However, as a directional spell, in the real world of Azeroth, there was no such thing as locking onto a target and being sure to hit it. It relied on the mage's own judgment. Prediction and whatnot was a very mysterious thing in and of itself. This thing relied on experience and intuition. Due to his limited mana and the fact that Duque couldn't find an effective way to replenish his mana, Duque didn't fully understand his flame blast. In fact, Duque also instinctively felt that according to the flying speed of the fireball, it would probably be near that area. However, after Duque's dynamic vision captured the existence that was as fast as a gust of wind, only 0.5 seconds later, a feeling of bliss came to his mind. Perhaps the vulture could choose to roll left or right. However, Duque did not think that this feathered beast had such a high IQ. Therefore, Duque chose to make an advanced calculation. The dozen or so guards had yet to recover from the shock of their own people being attacked, and they suddenly realized that the important person they were protecting had made a move. Whoosh! With a strong light and a burning sensation, a huge fireball flew out of the window of the carriage, dragging a long trail of flames behind it. It shot straight in front of Vulture. Good. Oh. No. Ah. The mercenaries' undulating cries were a good reflection of the development of the situation. At the very beginning, they were happy that Duque had made a move. They immediately realized that as the overlord of the sky in the Western Wilderness, this vulture, which was called the corpse shredder bird by most of the Western Wilderness farmers, had extraordinary mobility. The corpse shredder bird flapped its left wing hard, and the water tank-sized fireball was likely to pass by the beast that directly attacked a living person. The target of its attack was still the same. Every mercenary had an indescribable regret on their faces. However, the next moment, the young hand that stretched out of the carriage window suddenly snapped its fingers. The huge fireball seemed to have been gripped by an invisible hand. Bang! With a loud explosion, the fireball suddenly exploded beside the corpse shredder bird. Moreover, it was not an omnidirectional explosion, but a kind of one-way explosion, perfectly avoiding the young mercenary's side. Faced with the scattering of flames that were even denser than the torrential rain, with a croak, that hateful feathered beast instantly turned into a raging torch, falling from the sky in a dejected manner. From joy to disappointment, and then to ecstasy, the mercenaries' hearts were like a roller coaster. Seeing the corpse shredder bird fall, they raised the weapons in their hands. Long live Sir Marcus! It was only then that the young lad who was almost killed by the ambush suddenly realized that he had already circled the gates of hell. Listening to the enthusiastic cheers, Duque was slightly stunned. He was willing to work hard to change the fate of Stormwind, but this did not mean that he would become a saint who blessed the common people and saved everyone. Duque had never thought of himself as a saint. For him, rather than saying that this was a rescue, it was better to say that this was just a practice. The moment he made his move, the action was already ahead of his thoughts. Now, Duque's actions were acknowledged by the mercenaries and were rewarded. The mercenary leader, Makarov, rode his skinny horse and pulled the young man who had just escaped death. "Thank you very much, great Sir Marcus. You just saved my son." "Son?" "Yes, my only son, Philip. This is his first mission. His mother and I were strongly against it. Fortunately, he's fine. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to go back and see his mother." Makarov's voice choked as he said this. He pressed down on Philip's head and made his son bow to Duque. "It's good that you're fine. Let's continue our journey." To be honest, Duque did not want to have too much to do with Makarov and the rest. After all, he was only using this group of mercenaries as a cover. He did not want to implicate them because of his matters. Seeing that Duque was a little cold on the outside but warm on the inside, Makarov was not annoyed. After all, Duque had just demonstrated his nobility with his actions. Makarov bowed. "Actually, it's like this. I accidentally obtained a magic note. There are words that we do not understand engraved on it. But I think that it should be of help to you, sir. If you can accept it, that would be for the best." "Oh, then thank you in advance." Duque did not act pretentiously and took the note that looked like a small notebook. The money that old Norton gave him would eventually run out one day. When it came to magic, the more the better, the better. But when he took the note and opened it, he was dumbfounded. It was not that the system elf could not decipher or learn it, but rather that the system prompt was a little mysterious. "Congratulations, host. You have obtained the level 0 spell, Mage Hand, the level 2 spells, Darson's Quenching Prison, and Darson's Blazing Furnace." Duque had played World of Warcraft for so long that he dared to swear on his life that these 3 spells did not exist in the list of spells of Azeroth's wizards. Chapter 36. Duque's life was worthless. Duque's moral integrity was not worth much at all. Duque's oath still had some effect. Duque felt a tremor from the deepest part of his heart. After entering the world of Azeroth, he once again felt the prank from fate. The 4 Windrunner sisters and whatnot were already ridiculous enough. Now, even the magic system had a strong sense of crossover. However, magic was magic. Almost at the moment when Duque opened the note, he had already deeply felt the mysterious resonance between himself and these spells. It was like a sense of recognition, a more circumstantial way of thinking coming into his mind. At that moment it was as if the definition of mage that had been solidified in the game had the most eye-catching chemical reaction. Back in Duque's Viry, mages only represented high-attack long-range artillery, the strongest control profession. However, at this moment, there seemed to be the brightest light illuminating his mind, and in this light, a door opened. He seemed to have passed through this door and saw many things that were beyond the framework of his mind. Unconsciously, a list of spells appeared in his mind. All the spells were reclassified: defense, spell, prophecy, enchantment, evocation, illusion, necromancy, transformation, and general. There were a total of 9 categories. Among them, most of the categories were still hazy and pitch black. But this, after all, represented more possibilities. This was not an illusion that only existed for the briefest moment and immediately dissipated, but a kind of development that broke the rules of Azeroth. Even this list of spells could be repeatedly brought up in the field of vision through the system elf. Duque also discovered one thing. Whether it was Flame Blast, or Frost Arrow, at the beginning, or Darson's Frigid Prison, and other spells, it seemed that the spells that were related to him before he transmigrated would all be greatly enhanced. For the spells related to fire and ice, the large number of thermodynamic calculation formulas that popped up in the system prompt was enough. Even Mage Hand, which should have been categorized as a level 0 cantrip, was greatly enhanced. The reason for the strengthening made Duque speechless. A lot of motion capture technology has been detected in the host's memory. Inputting and improving the corresponding laws. Preset thought transmission nodes in Hand of Magic. Hand of Magic is expected to increase flexibility by 180% and strength by 230%. Your Hand of Magic has advanced, level unknown, estimated to be over level 2. Before Duque transmigrated, the most well-known use of motion capture was in filming. By attaching dozens of trackers to the key parts of an actor's face, the muscle movements of the entire face could be converted into data that could be processed by a computer to measure the size of an object, as well as to determine the location and orientation of objects in a physical space. Unexpectedly, this could be reversed by the system elf. Duque snapped his fingers in front of Makarov. Paw! A magic palm the size of a human hand appeared out of thin air in front of one of the mercenaries. It was glowing with a pale blue radiance. This strange phenomenon startled the mercenaries. Although they were horrified, they quickly raised their swords and sabers. However, they quickly came to their senses and found the source of their shock. The ghost hand floating in the air had the exact same movement as Duque's right hand. They finally understood that it was released by Duque. Duque's face bloomed with a gentle smile. Makarov, thank you for your generous gift. I owe you one. Makarov quickly recovered from his shock. No. Respected Sir Marcus, my son is my priceless treasure. If you are satisfied with my gift in return, that would be the greatest consolation for me. That was often the case when it came to favors. After this exchange, the indifferent and estranged relationship between employer and employee quickly warmed up because of this small interlude. Under Duque's insistence, Makarov was willing to drop the "sir" and call Duque Marcus in private. Before he knew it, it was already night. After coming to this world, Duque was still not used to all sorts of things. Everything in this world was so primitive. After nightfall, there was almost no light. There was no moonlight, and only the dim yellow of the western wilderness could be vaguely seen within the range of the firelight. The caravan set up camp on the leeward side of a small hill. After dinner, there were only 1 or 2 night watchmen left in the temporary camp to drive away the wild beasts. Everyone fell asleep. In this quiet and dark environment, Duque should have fallen asleep very quickly, but the strange and dazzling scenery around him made Duque unable to fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. Duque began to review the few spells he had. At this moment, Duque suddenly heard a conversation between 2 night watchmen. Karen? Did you hear anything? Something seems to be approaching. Almost at the same time, Duque heard a prompt from the system elf. Host. Detected a large number of dangerous life signals. The enemy is determined to be a gnoll. Number 50, 60, 100, 170. In the darkness in the distance, countless short shadows were silently approaching this place at high speed. Enemy attack. The night watchman's mournful and loud cry woke all the sleeping mercenaries up. Oh, hell, it's Hog, heavens, it's really Hog. The name Hog seemed to have a terrifying magic that made people tremble. People who grew up in the elven forest would often be scared awake by the cries of gnolls. Because no matter how powerful humans were, no matter whether they had actually become the masters of the elven forest or not, they could not forget the nightmare of the elven forest, Hog. This giant gnoll wandering in the south of West Spring's stronghold brought them dark memories. Legend has it that the name, Hog, was just a codename given to this or this branch of gnolls by the humans. People did not know how long the gnolls lived, but the people of the elven forest always called the leader of the gnolls, the largest one, Hog. Legend has it that Hog's body was twice the size of an ordinary gnoll, and that his claws could easily tear infantry shields in half, and that his strong legs could easily catch up with poor adventurers who tried to escape. But these were just legends, because no one could really face Hog and come back alive. If one were to list the most famous and powerful villains near Stormwind City, Hog had already occupied the headlines of Stormwind City's bulletin board. Almost all the adventurers who were tempted by the bounty set by Stormwind City had died under his feet. Now, Hog had come with his army of gnolls. Chapter 37. Darkness brought about a primal fear. The fear of darkness was imprinted in the hearts of humans since the time when they ate raw meat and drank blood. It was now fermenting in everyone's hearts. Every mercenary felt a bitter taste in their mouths. Damn it! Did Hog bring his entire gnoll army? Aren't they only active in the elven forest? Why would they cross the river and come to the western wilderness? The people of this era had night blindness due to the lack of sea products in their diet. Even with the light of the fire, they still looked like they were covered in shadows. Makarov suddenly laughed dryly. Oh, think on the bright side. The sheriff of Gold's Hire in the elven forest, Duhan, has been waiting night after night. He's waiting for a hunter who can bring back evidence of Hog's death. If we can kill Hog and bring his huge claws to the people of Gold's Hire, we'll get double the reward. Boss, we're dead for sure. Makarov's joke did not boost their morale. Have you forgotten who we still have? Makarov's reminder suddenly boosted everyone's morale. That's right. We still have Sir Duke Marcus. Thinking of Duque's extravagant and unimaginable magic during the day, everyone felt as if they had drunk a glass of strong alcohol, their bodies surging with warmth. They could not help but put part of their attention on the carriage. At this moment, Duque's expression was not good. He really did not expect to welcome his first real battle at this time. And the biggest problem was that the style of these gnolls had changed. When old Norton first escorted Duque's 3 apprentices to Stormwind City, Duque had also encountered gnolls. At that time, gnolls were just monsters with strong limbs but short statures. Other than their numbers, they had nothing good about them. But now, it was completely different. Through the system elf, Duque was able to see the gnoll's body shape. Duque paid attention to the data given by the system. An adult gnoll is about 1.9 meters tall and weighs about 120 kilograms. After the system elf filled the targets with light, Duque noticed that these humanoid monsters had greenish-gray or dark green skin and aardwolf-like heads that were 3 times larger than their brethren. As for the giant monster that was more than 4 meters tall, it had the following description. Mutated elite monster, Hog, data unknown, detected unusual increase in strength. Danger assessment is high danger. It is strongly recommended that the host retreat. Seeing this, even Duke couldn't help but let out a hiss and suck in a breath of cold air. What the hell was this? This was completely against the rules. 4 meters tall. Wasn't this the template of an ogre? Speaking of which, Uncle Hog. Is there a need to jump out of your territory to chase after me? Before Duque traveled to this world, Hog was known as the new assassin in World of Warcraft. In the original version of the game, almost all the new players in Gold's Hire Town who received the wanted quest, Hog must die, would foolishly run off to kill Hog. As a result, the players experienced what an elite monster was for the first time. 1, 2, 3, 4. The newbie players killed by Hog could line up twice around the Earth's equator. Of course, this was an exaggeration. But it was an indisputable fact that the players were taught a lesson by Uncle Hog. In the players' mouths, whenever they talked about Hog, they would add the title of Uncle Hog. Therefore, Hog became Uncle Hog. When Duque passed through the elven forest, he didn't encounter any gnolls. Perhaps it was because Makarov deliberately chose to be close to the West Spring fortress guarded by the Stormwind guards, which made Duque forget about Hog. In the end, Hog didn't act like a tyrant in the elven forest. Instead, he crossed the border and chased after him here. This situation made Duque a little confused. Whoosh! 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 The huge figure passed through the distant fire that was used as a warning. In the light of the fire, Hog's terrifying figure seemed even larger and more oppressive. In the light of the fire, Hog's dog-like head could be seen, with long yellow teeth and blood-red eyes. Fluffy black and yellow fur covered his body. Originally, gnolls were used to taking the fur of cattle and other livestock and making simple leather armor. Of course, they also liked to take all kinds of weapons from attacking humans, so gnolls often had a variety of weapons and armor. Hog was different. Perhaps it was because his body was too large that he didn't have any weapons or armor. Or maybe it was because he had just become this huge not too long ago, so Hog showed Duke and the mercenaries a body without any armor, full of explosive power, and unbelievably thick fur. Oh my god! Did he attack a post or Westspring fortress? The mercenaries saw several long swords stuck in Hog's body. The standard swords of Stormwind City's human guards were like toothpicks on his body. Perhaps it was because Hog wanted to show off his strength, or because his mind was a little crazy, but he didn't even pull out the swords that should be causing him some pain. What he held in his right hand was probably a flagpole, because this flagpole would require an adult human to wrap their arms around it, and there was a small section of Stormwind City's flag on it. A woo, it sounded a little like a dog's bark, but also a little like a wolf's howl. Hog let out a threatening roar, announcing his existence to the entire team. In just a short while, Hog's subordinates had already surrounded them from all sides. At the same time, Makarov and the rest finally heard the heavenly voice from within the carriage. Get closer to me, and stay within the range of the blizzard? The mercenaries understood what it meant to get closer. But within the range of the blizzard? The mercenaries didn't quite understand. In the next second, when the roaring gnolls charged forward with all kinds of weapons, and they could even smell their foul breath, the mercenaries understood. A beautiful voice. The essence of a voice shouldn't be beautiful. But right now, the sound of thousands of icicles falling from the sky, the sound that allowed Makarov and the others to escape death, suddenly gave the word sound a magnificent prefix. The icicles fell on the ground tens of meters wide, and the gnolls' attack faltered momentarily. The barbaric tide of monsters still wanted to break through the seemingly weak defensive formation of Makarov and the others, but they were quickly caught in their trap. Chapter 38. The gnolls that were charging at the front somehow fell to the ground. Their low IQ could not understand what it meant to increase the damage. The outermost layer was indeed fluttering snow, but the slowness was just an illusion to deceive the eyes of these low IQ creatures. The closer to the center, the denser the icicles became, from the size of a thumb to the size of a goose egg, and even the size of a brick. These icicles whistled as they fell from the sky, and some of them even created strong air turbulence. The falling icicles shattered on the ground, and the cold ice powder flew all over the sky. The bone-chilling cold air numbed their nerves, and they did not even notice that the icicles that fell on their heads were not small hailstones, but long icicles that looked like icicles. A few of the gnolls that did not have eyes were smart enough to raise their small leather shields and rush through the killing zone created by the ice storm, but they did not end up any better than the previous ones. One by one, they were pierced into sieves by the icicles that fell from the sky. Makarov and the others held their breath, nervously holding their shields in front of them and holding their swords as they stared at the attack of the gnolls. What they saw was the gnolls charging at them under Hog's command, and then they fell, and again, and again. It was as if the gnolls that were charging at them were not terrifying monsters that could kill them, but fat pigs that were sent to the slaughterhouse. Everyone watched as the ice storm surrounded them in a ring shape. It did not affect them at all, but according to the intensity of the attack of the gnolls, the icicles became denser and thinner. It was as if the person in the carriage would run out of mana at any time, as if this exaggerated offensive-defensive circle would collapse at any time, but that did not happen. Every time the density of the icicles decreased, as if they could not kill even one more gnoll, their mana seemed to be magically replenished, and the density of the icicles immediately returned to its original state. Under Hog's angry roar, the gnolls tried to retreat many times, and they braced themselves to attack Makarov and the others again, but without exception, they became frozen corpses in the ice storm. From the beginning to the end, everyone could not help but feel a little numb. It was as if the people that were charging at this defensive circle were not the subordinates of the nightmare of the elven forest, but a group of sheep abandoned by the shepherds to endure the snowstorm. Someone muttered about how much bounty they could get from so many gnolls' claws. Makarov's son's mood was even more youthful as he extended his sword to test the might of the ice storm that was just inches away from him. No, Makarov's expression changed. He could almost imagine his son turning into an ice sculpture like those stupid gnolls. After all, in his eyes, even those sky wizards who had been famous for many years, or even morning star wizards, did not have such fine control abilities. Unexpectedly, with a stretch of his sword, the encirclement of the ice tempest actually bulged outwards. Hey! Before he could be proud of himself, his father suddenly pulled him back. Dad, I'm fine. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. If his father hadn't pulled him back, he would have been a corpse by now. It was just a distance of a few fingers, but the blade of a super huge axe made of flagpole tied to stones almost brushed past his face. The huge axe swept up gravel and icicles that swept across his forehead, leaving behind a few streaks of blood. He could not imagine what would have happened if he had taken this attack head-on. His head and neck, as well as his helmet that should have had defensive properties, would have been blown apart in an instant. He would have become an unknown object that was neither flesh nor metal. Hiss! Looking at the shocking attack that split apart the ice tempest, almost every mercenary sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at Hog's terrifying figure that bore through the sky full of icicles and forcefully broke through the ice tempest's encirclement to kill his way into the defensive circle, anyone would wonder if there was a human that could match this monster. The answer was, there was. The carriage door that was never opened other than when Duque pooped opened with a creak. The blue and white mage robe with the emblem of an earth mage was the most eye-catching thing in this moonless night. The violent ice tempest suddenly changed its direction. It no longer fell from above, but with the carriage as the center, it poured out diagonally. Arg! The screams of the gnolls reached their peak in an instant. But everyone knew that this was not the end. Many gnolls had died, and many more were injured. However, at least 40% of the gnolls were still intact. Duque, who had not spoken a word since the start of the battle, put his hand on Makarov's shoulder and said, Makarov, while I'm fighting Hog, you and your men should try to break out of the encirclement. If anyone makes it back to Stormwind City alive, tell Lord Norton that Duque has betrayed his trust. Makarov shook his head. Let's not talk about whether people will hire mercenaries who abandon their employers. Just abandoning the benefactor who saved my son's life is enough to disqualify me from being a human. Makarov and the mercenaries behind him had the same expression. Their eyes were filled with the same determination to fight to the death. Duque was silent for a second. Then you and your men take care of yourselves. In the next moment, Duke's deep black eyes met with Hog's scarlet eyes, which were not far away. Even though they did not speak the same language, they both understood that this would be a battle between king and king. Whoever won, the rest of the enemy's forces would collapse in an instant. Ha! 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 Hog's thick nose twitched as he panted heavily. The thirst for blood stimulated his senses. An arm that was even thicker than Duke's waist suddenly burst out, and the explosive muscle strength was revealed in an instant. Hog easily lifted the nearly 6-meter-long self-made axe onto his shoulder. In an instant, his domineering aura overflowed. Duque stood up proudly. At this time, the gnolls who had been defeated rushed up again. The gnolls had two tactics, scatter or swarm. What would happen to Makarov and the rest? This was not something that Duque could take care of. He focused all his attention on Hog. If it was Duque who just came out of Stormwind City, he would definitely not be Hog's match. Hog's mistake was that he let his lackeys go first. Duque did not know that experience points existed in the world of Azeroth. It was a little inappropriate to call it experience points, because the system notification clearly stated, "Congratulations," because the host used the compound spell, Ice Storm, composed of Darsong's Cold Prison, and Blizzard, to kill the gnoll. You have refined 110 soul force from the gnoll's body. You can use this power to expand your magic circuits. Chapter 39. As a veteran player, as a university student who could not tell the difference between a game and life after transmigrating to a different world, Duque automatically thought of it as the experience points needed to level up. In terms of practical effects, there were similar places. You used 2,500 points of soul power to open up the third magic circuit. Your intelligence value increased by 5 points, your mana value increased by 50 points, and your spell strength increased by an unknown amount. Killing and arson had been a shortcut to getting rich since ancient times. Gnolls were also people, and Duque did not hesitate to use the soul power brought by these gnolls to jump from a level 1 Earth Mage to a level 4 Mage in one breath. How strong was a level 4 Mage? Duque did not know. Instinctively, he felt that his mana pool was still a small bucket that would stop after 8 or 10 frost arrows. He had imagined countless times that Uncle Hog would first give away all his minions as experience points, then laugh 3 times and say, "Since you can kill all my minions, you are indeed qualified to fight with me." Finally, he would be taught a lesson by the upgraded Duque with a big fireball. Unfortunately, Hog's reckless and impulsive personality ruined Duque's dream. Hog, this guy, actually went straight up with the frost storm. Didn't they say that the boss would appear at the end? It was not scientific. Well, whether it was scientific or not, it was meaningless. Staring at the matchstick-like human mage that he hated the most in the convoy, Hog rushed over. Fast. So fast. Although Hog was huge, his speed did not slow down at all. On the contrary, under Hog's muscular hind legs that could almost be described as majestic, its enormous body suddenly became as forceful as a bullet train speeding at high speed. The hill-like figure rapidly enlarged in Duque's field of vision. Calm and composed, flame burst, this continuous skill that Duque had used almost every time since he transmigrated. This time, it failed. Completely without any sense of justice, Hog brandished his giant axe, and with a gorgeous and explosive sweep, he actually, split Duque's big fireball horizontally in half. After the core of the fireball was destroyed, the rest of the fireball turned into flames that struggled on their deathbed. They twitched twice in the night sky before disappearing. Holy sh**t. Duque gaped at the unscientific scene in front of him. Then, death came. Hog, who was closing in at high speed, didn't even wave his stone axe, which was full of destructive power. He only gave Duque a contemptuous glance, and then kicked Duque's chest. Puff, an extremely muffled sound came from Duque's chest. In the next second, Duque was sent flying like a bag of trash. His blue and white robes drew a beautiful arc in the night sky as he fell not far from Makarov, who was still fighting fiercely in the middle of the battlefield. This scene shocked everyone in the mercenary group. No way. Isn't Sir Marcus the strongest? How did he die? Sir Marcus. Someone shouted. No, healing potions. Who's going to give me healing potions? It's over. His chest has completely caved in, and his internal organs are probably mud. He's definitely dead. The mercenaries were in a mess. No one had expected that the mysterious and powerful young mage Duke, whom they had been getting along with for the past few days, would be killed by Hog in a single move. But thinking about it, Hog was the nightmare of the elven forest. If they couldn't deal with him, why would they hope that the stronger Duque could? It turned out that killing the powerful Hog was just an illusory dream from start to finish. Makarov abandoned his opponent and almost shot forward, picking up Duque, who was already gasping for breath. He remembered how Duque saved his son, and remembered Duque's smile. Makarov roared towards the sky, "Everyone, attack! Avenge Sir Duke Marcus, avenge, avenge!" The roars of the mercenaries resounded. Hogg, who was more than 10 steps away, did not immediately rush forward. His hyena mouth was wide open, and the crisscrossed sharp teeth could be seen under the light of the fire. He was actually laughing. Laughing at the group of weak humans who overestimated themselves, laughing at the struggle of these puny humans. It was not just Hogg, even the surrounding gnolls let out proud barks. Just when the mercenaries thought that Duque was dead, Makarov suddenly realized that the weight in his arms had mysteriously disappeared. "Go!" Duque, who should have been dead, rushed towards Hogg, a cold blue and white radiance blossoming in his hands. Makarov and the rest were stunned. They had seen Duque's condition earlier, and he was in a state where he was on the verge of death. Duque actually dragged his body like this to buy time for them to evacuate. Unknowingly, the mercenaries' eyes were brimming with tears. This was a heroic scene. They watched as Duque released another frost arrow. Hogg seemed to have been caught off guard by Duque's attack. He did not manage to dodge the frost arrow, and his entire left arm was covered in frost. However, that was all. Hogg let out an angry roar when he regained his senses, and the muscles in his right arm bulged as he swung his axe again. This time, the axe did not hit anything. Duque seemed to have twisted his body at the last moment and avoided the fate of being split in half. Duque was not much better off. When he was sent flying, the mercenaries could even see parts of Duque's arm that had been smashed into smithereens, and the flesh on the surface of his body was scattered everywhere. It was a tragic scene. For these mercenaries who did not know each other just a few days ago, Duque, the future hope of the kingdom, an incomparably noble mage, had actually shed his blood for them. They watched as Duque's figure, which was not tall, fell tragically in the fire. They were furious. "Duque! Kill! Kill them mercilessly! Kill these bastards! Charge! Avenge Sir Marcus!" The furious mercenaries began their desperate charge. They even abandoned the shields that they relied on to protect their lives. While letting out angry roars, they madly chased after the tall gnolls. The gnolls, who obviously had the advantage in numbers, were the ones being chased. "A woo!" Hogg roared, and suddenly the gnolls seemed to have found their backbone. They immediately turned around and surrounded him again. Yes. As long as Hogg did not die. These fierce and timid gnolls would fight like the bravest berserkers to the last man. However, at this time, Duque unexpectedly stood up again. The mercenaries cried. Men did not easily shed tears, but these mercenaries, who had long been accustomed to life and death, had tears on their faces. Chapter 40. Are we really worthy of Sir Marcus going this far? They thought. I didn't expect him to have the heart of a warrior despite being a mage. Heaven is on the left, and a warrior is on the right. He is too brave. Too fearless. Surrounded by the swarm of gnolls, Duque only had time to cast a flame burst before falling down. Next, the mercenaries began to feel very strange. Duque stood up again. "Fuck you, Hogg." A flame burst. Duque fell down again. This time, Duque was directly split in two by an axe. Duque stood up again. "I will kill all 18 generations of gnolls." Again and again. Under Hogg's fierce counterattack, Duque fell down again, and stood up again and again, without doing anything, just cursing and throwing fireballs at the huge Hogg's face. Even a fool could see that although Hogg was brave and tenacious, the flames on Hogg's body never extinguished, and instead, they burned bigger and bigger. Hogg's injuries were accumulating. His roar was not as loud. His gnoll brothers were not so quick to respond to his orders. Even his movements seemed to be slow. Even if he had lost a lot of his rationality, he realized that he was in a bad situation. Slowly, Duque was able to cast a flame burst first, followed by an instant flame burst, before finally being slapped to death. All the tears in the mercenaries' glands were drained. They felt as if they had been played by this mysterious young mage, but it seemed that they had not. After all, Duque had told them to run from the beginning. Wasn't Duque fighting with his life to protect these burdens? As a mage with so many life-saving skills, it should not be a problem for him to escape alone, right? Even if Duque fell tragically every time and then rose from the ashes, his performance was enough to become a topic of conversation in the tavern after a meal. But they noticed something strange. The ordinary gnolls had long since dispersed and hid far away, watching in awe as their boss fought with the unkillable Duque. On the other side, Makarov solemnly instructed his men. "We won't say a word about what we saw today even if we go to hell. If I'm not wrong, this concerns a very important secret of Lord Duke Marcus. If we are lucky, we will be Sir Marcus retainers for the rest of our lives." Everyone shivered and nodded in unison. Such a strange ability was absolutely unheard of. Was there any lack of people who inadvertently learned the secrets of important figures and were killed? Being able to sell his body and not be killed was already a great thing. On the other side, Hogg's life force was about to run out as he continued to accumulate injuries. Magic Beam Cannon. Duque roared out the name of the unknown move. With slow steps, he actually stepped onto the crook of Hogg's left arm, which was hanging on the ground, and borrowed the force to step onto Hogg's shoulder. Then, in an extremely pretentious manner, he inserted 2 fingers into Hogg's eye sockets. Instant cast, Flame Blast, at 0 range. A woo! Unlike the high-spirited howl at the beginning, the final bitter howl contained too much unwillingness and indignation. However, the cry was only halfway through before it came to a screeching halt. This was because Hogg's entire head was filled with flames that were rapidly expanding from within. A mere second later, the back of Hogg's huge head exploded like a watermelon. The gnolls watching the battle from afar were frightened and fled in all directions. Standing proudly on the huge chest of Hogg's collapsed body, Duque, who was bathed in a rain of blood, didn't have much of a sense of accomplishment. In the game before Duque transmigrated, Hogg was just a level 11 elite monster. Even if he had the shocking nickname of Cute Killer, in the end, he was just an unremarkable little monster. Unexpectedly, in order to kill Hogg, he had to pay the price of 11 revivals. When he thought of this, Duke felt a sense of despair as if he had fallen to the ground. But now that he had the time to look at the system notifications, Duque suddenly froze. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the elite demonified monster, Hogg. You have successfully foiled an attempt on your life by one of Sardra's demons. Because Hogg's body contains a small amount of demonic aura, if you give its remaining head to a cleric in Stormwind City, there might be an unexpected reward. You have obtained the blueprint of the skinning battle axe, which even low-intelligence creatures can make. As you have successfully killed the monster that killed you 11 times, you have recovered a small amount of your humanity. Your current soul force is 87, and your moral integrity is 72%. You are now a level 5 Earth Wizard. After reading this, Duque almost jumped up, and immediately questioned the system elf in the spiritual world. Hey! What the hell is this? Why do I only have 72% moral integrity left? Because the one that killed you is a demonic creature. As a demon that can easily corrupt human souls, it will have a bonus effect when it kills you. In other words, if you are killed by a demon, your moral integrity will fall even faster. Duque almost choked on his own saliva. I hate demons the most. Unknowingly, Duque's sinister expression had scared the hell out of Makarov and the rest. Recalling Makarov's words, they fearfully knelt in front of Hogg's giant corpse and lowered their heads, not even daring to look up at Duque. Makarov spoke, "Thank you, Lord Marcus, for saving us. We have nothing to repay you with, so we hope to use our lowly lives to contribute to Lord Marcus's great cause." Oh. Duque was roused from his daze by the voice, and his interest was piqued. Why? Originally, Duque wanted to ask why Makarov would say such a thing. Makarov looked at the murderous Duque and clearly misunderstood. He thought that Duque was asking them why they were spared. We are grateful to Lord Marcus for saving us, but we have seen Lord Marcus's undying secret. We don't want to die yet, so we are willing to serve Lord Marcus for life. Duque was stunned. He did not know why, but he recalled how Aurelia had deceived him the first time they met. Duque suddenly burst into laughter. Thank you for being willing to serve me. When Duque said this, Makarov and the rest heaved a long sigh of relief, as if they had just walked through the gates of hell. Duque's next words immediately made their hearts jump to their throats. However, I cannot accept your allegiance for this reason. Makarov immediately panicked. Lord Marcus, at this moment, something unexpected happened. Not far from Duque's feet, a gnoll that was still alive suddenly jumped up and ruthlessly chopped at Duque's neck with a rough stone axe. It happened too quickly, and no one had time to react. Ah! The mercenaries cried out in shock. At such a close distance, they saw Duque's neck spurt out blood, and then he fell to the ground, dead. Heavens! What did Lord Marcus do? Before they could recover from their shock, Duque's corpse suddenly turned into a faint stream of light and disappeared. There was almost no transition, and Duque stood unscathed less than 2 steps away from the corpse. Damn you! A mere gnoll actually dared to sneak attack me. It was fine if he died in Hog's hands, but he was actually killed by an ordinary gnoll. This was really humiliating. Gnashing his teeth in hatred, Duque used a large fireball to teach that guy who dared to make him lose his moral integrity to a maggot for the rest of his life. With great difficulty, he calmed down, and Duque was that elegant Lord Mage again. See? This is just a type of magic. To be precise, it is my family's ancestral talent, mirror image. Every mage family has its own inheritance. Some families are good at elemental magic, and some are good at arcane magic. I am just the inheritor of a declining mage family. This is not some shocking secret that needs to be kept secret. Of course, this is also one of my trump cards, and I do not want you to spread it around. Duque's performance made the mercenaries dumbfounded, but with such an explanation, every mercenary felt at ease. Ah! So it is mysterious magic. We commoners who do not know magic have really learned something new. Looking at their happy faces, Duque's heart ached. I've lost my moral integrity again. Chapter 41. Soul power at 86, moral integrity at 71%. This was Duque's current situation. Duque had no choice but to accept reality. What was bitter was that he had to die one more time to prevent his greatest magic weapon from being seen through so early. He didn't feel it after dying 11 times in a row, but now that he had calmed down, he realized that death was such a painful thing. What was worse was that he had to die one more time for showing off without reason. Duque cursed in his heart, shit on Sargeras. Oh, no, Sargeras, it's all your fault, you bastard. Regardless of whether you did it or not, it's all on your head. But what made Duque the most uncertain were the records in the system. Because you have died 3 times in a row in a short period of time, you have triggered the negative soul status, wrath, of the 7 sins. After reviving, your spell power will increase by 20%, your attack speed will increase by 30%, your evasion rate will decrease to 0, your defense will decrease by 30%, your willpower will increase by 200%, and you will be immune to most mental spells and special effects. After a bunch of messy messages, an even more eye-catching bright red notification appeared. Because you have been killed 10 times in a row by the elite demonified monster, Gnoll Leader, Hog, you have triggered the crazy special effect, Deathmatch Cage. You have lost your sense of self, and automatically set Hog as the enemy you must kill. Before you completely kill Hog, you will continue to revive crazily and attack Hog with everything you can. Deathmatch Cage. After this special effect is triggered, every time you revive, your maximum HP and mana will temporarily decrease by 10%. Every time you revive, your spell power will increase by 10%, and your attack speed will increase by 10%. This special effect will continue until you kill the target, or until you completely lose your humanity. After reading these messages, Duque was completely speechless. It seemed like dying consecutively would turn him into a berserker, but this was something even crazier than a gambler who had lost everything, a gambler. Either he would turn the tables in one go and kill his opponent, or he would become a ghoul and be completely finished. Of course, Duque did not forget the word 7 deadly sins. Anger, arrogance, jealousy. Just thinking about these characteristics made him feel like he was a demon king. If it wasn't for the fact that there weren't any normal girls in the Scourge army, which was made up entirely of immortals, and that if he joined the Scourge army, his attractiveness would plummet even further. Duque really wanted to join the Scourge army and take over the position of filthy demon king. Currently, the system elf was unable to determine just how strong the demonized Hog was. However, according to the original game's evaluation, Hog was at most an elite monster in the novice area. How strong could he be after demonization? No matter how strong he was, could he be stronger than those evil dragons, ancient gods, or the boss of the demon army? He suddenly realized that the road ahead was still long. The wind tonight was a little noisy. Duque was thinking about the problem. Unknowingly, the effects of his low moral integrity began to show. Humans were very sensitive creatures. Even though Duque said that it was not a big problem, the faint cold aura after he lost his moral integrity still made Makarov and the others, who were at their most sensitive period, even more anxious. They looked at each other and understood each other's thoughts. It seemed that this secret was quite important to Lord Marcus. Although not the most important, it was still quite important. At this moment, they already had their own assessment of the extent of the secret of Duque's ancestral, mirror image doppelganger. After a big battle, it was natural to clean up the battlefield. This kind of heavy work was naturally not done by Duque. Continuous resurrections would also bring about abnormal fatigue. Not only his body, but also his soul. Due to the loss of his soul, Duque was a little sickly. Duque went to bed early. The next morning, when the first light of dawn appeared, the tragic battlefield last night had basically been cleaned up. A large number of gnolls killed by the ice storm had thawed, and there was no time to bury the bodies of these large gnolls. When they completely thawed, they would become vultures' food. Makarov respectfully came to the carriage and reported, "Stormwind has a unified bounty for gnolls. A pair of adult gnoll's claws is 10 silver coins, but such a large gnoll's bounty is estimated to be even higher. The most important thing is Hog's claws. Apart from Stormwind City, at least 5 towns in the Elven Forest have set up independent bounties for him. May I ask, Lord Marcus, how should we deal with it?" Duque's eyes turned a little coldly. "How do you think we should deal with it?" Being swept by Duque's slightly sharp gaze, Makarov thought that Duque was testing him and immediately answered the answer he had been pondering for a long time. "If Lord Marcus is at ease, I will leave my son here and bring 2 people with me to transport Hog's head and claws back to Stormwind City. I can guarantee that within a week, Lord Marcus's reputation for killing Hog will spread through half of Stormwind." Leaving his son was equivalent to handing over the hostage. But Duque did not care at all. He was thinking about something else. Last time he obtained Northshire Abbey's reputation, it seemed that he had recovered a point of moral integrity. Now that he killed Hog, and it was a demonized Hog at that, how much reputation would he gain? Forget it, if he could recover a point, then so be it. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. "Makarov, how about this? I don't need your mercenary band to protect me from now on. I have something more important to entrust to you. Please speak." Makarov was excited. A few days ago, an outpost should have been attacked by Hog and his men. "So not only do you need to publicize my achievements, but I also want you to give half of the bounty to the injured and the widows of the victims as compensation." Makarov immediately understood and asked, "What happens after everything is done?" "We all owe you our lives, Lord Marcus. We will be happy to serve you." Duque thought for a moment. His plan did indeed require someone to run errands. Then after everything is done, come to Moon Creek Town and wait for me. I will be back in 2 weeks at most. All right. Duque had already asked around. The current Moon Creek Town was not the desolate town that was controlled by the Defias Brotherhood and was filled with bandits. As a pioneer town at the borders of Stormwind, there were more than 1,000 residents and a lord. The Baron had formed a militia of 100 men as a necessary military force. Perhaps this was the predecessor of the Western Wilderness People's Army in the future. Duque's target was not there. Instead, he set his sights on the northern coastline of the Western Wilderness. There were many fishmen there. Chapter 42. Murlocs were the most common and annoying monsters in the world of Azeroth. They could be seen in almost all tidal flats and wide lakes. They had slippery skin, smart eyes that were bigger than your fist, and dorsal fins that were extremely stylish. Their bright colors and roguish style were their trademark. Murlocs on their own were absolutely useless, and the following would often happen in a one-on-one fight. Caw, the Murloc squawked and started fighting without saying a word. Caw. They felt a little pain, and immediately turned and ran. Chase them. These monsters with strong limbs and a fish head and body could run fast, and they could swim. Run home as soon as you started chasing. Caw, 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 caw. In no time, a large group of Murlocs would run towards you, and teach you a lesson. If you beat them all away with your arrogance, then the result would be that more mere people would join in the pursuit of you. This chain reaction that could easily explode caused Duque to suffer greatly back then. So why did Duque want to find Murlocs? Firstly, Murlocs were the vassals of some powerful deep-sea creature that was still in slumber or waiting. It could be said that Murlocs were used to being enslaved. Secondly, Murlocs were not as stupid as many people thought they were. Part of the evidence showed that their steady and gradual occupation of land was in fact highly coordinated and organized. However, whether this plan was in line with the Murloc's own wishes and interests was unknown. Most importantly, that day in Elven Forest, after giving the corpse of a poor thief from the Brando family to the Murlocs as supper, Duque suddenly discovered a strange language in the system notification, Murloc. The amazing system actually directly deciphered the relatively simple Murloc language. Before transmigrating, knowing 2 foreign languages was more reliable when looking for a job than going to university. Unexpectedly, it seemed to be the same after transmigrating. After linking with the translation software provided by the system genie, even though Duque wanted to say, Motherf asterisk cur, what came out of his mouth was a hilarious cadence of wah, caw. This gave Duque a possibility, perhaps he could subdue the Murlocs. Under normal circumstances, Duque would never be so stupid as to do such a thing. But thinking about it, the beastmen had yet to attack, and the door of darkness had yet to open. In the world of Azeroth, no matter which country it was all about seniority. If Duque didn't find another way, it would be impossible for him to improve himself to the point where he could influence the battle before the door of darkness opened. Only by doing so would there be a chance to turn the impossible into the possible. So early in the morning, Duque went to the beach alone. He was already prepared to communicate with the Murlocs with magic, kill the mentally retarded ones, leave the less retarded ones, and finally arrange for a slightly more intelligent Murloc sage to be his representative. However, Duque suddenly discovered that, on the beach, 2 large Murloc tribes were playing clan conflict. Wow! Hundreds of fishmen were fighting on both sides. The scene must be bloody and violent, with flesh and blood flying everywhere and blood boiling, right? Duque suddenly realized that it was stupid of him to have such expectations. Hundreds of Murlocs fighting, the scene was more like a super large scale, hide and seek. Yo, over here, Murloc Tribe A gathered 3 Murlocs, against 2 Murlocs of Murloc Tribe B. Sorry, there was no such thing as a battle. The side with fewer numbers ran away as soon as they met. Obviously, they had 2 short legs, but they ran faster than rabbits. Huh. Suddenly, 2 Murlocs ran into 2 of their own tribe's clowns. Great, it became 3-4 again. Decisive counterattack, oh, no, counterattack. It was the turn of the 3 murlocs to run away. It was not easy to gather 2 murlocs of similar strength. One murloc's first-generation murloc fiercely threw a stone, causing the other murloc's second-generation to have his eyes swollen. The other side suddenly lost all their courage and scattered. Listening to the strange gawk sound in the murloc language, it roughly translated as, "It's not that the national army didn't work hard. But the Japanese army has Gundam. Gundam your sister. You call that piece of rock a high-speed kinetic weapon. You should apologize to all the Gundams in the world right now." Hearing the Bullsh *T translation of the system elf, Duque even wanted to strangle the system elf to death. But it was also good. Seeing this Bullsh *T battle of the murlocs, Duque also gave up the plan to organize the murlocs into an army. Knowing that the other side was all a staff. "You still specially went over to sell swords?" Duque was not that stupid. With a long sigh, Duque made his move. In the original plan, Duque felt that he had to kill at least 100 murlocs to make these clowns calm down a little. Who knew that as soon as Duque made his move, all the murlocs fell into a dead silence. The next moment, the sound of gawk was endless. On the beach, a large number of murlocs bowed their heads and bowed. The only reason was Duque's hand of magic. Hand of magic was a mage condensing the simplest arcane energy into the shape of a human palm, to do some simple work for the mage. For example, picking up a certain key from the place that was hanging high outside the iron cage. Duque's hand of magic was slightly different. After the system elf automatically extracted the operation of the motion capture system from Duque's head, Duque estimated that his hand of magic should be at least a level 2 spell. Because not only the quantity, but also the quality was not something that a regular mage could achieve. 8 palms of light floated in the void behind Duque. And 4 hands of magic easily tore apart the murloc that charged the fastest and intended to attack Duque. "Gawu, great emissary of the ocean, I, an old blind man, submit to you on behalf of all the tribes on the west coast. Oh, great god of the ocean, I, Yu Mao, submit to you on behalf of all the tribes on the west coast." Hundreds of fishmen knelt down and worshipped Duque like he was a god. This scene was really comical. It was done so easily. It was so easy that Duque found it hard to believe. Perhaps it proved that there was no free lunch in this world. Suddenly, there was a violent splashing sound on the seashore. Duque's pupils suddenly constricted. It was some creatures that shouldn't be here, Naga. Unlike other monsters in the world of Azeroth, Naga were actually quite noble. About 10,000 years ago, the leader of the Burning Legion, Sargeras, tempted Queen Azhara of the High Elven Kingdom and a group of High Elven nobles, asking them to prepare to open a portal for the Burning Legion to invade the world of Azeroth. This ancient war ended with the defeat of the Demon King, Sargeras. And when Queen Azhara and her cronies fell into the sea, in order to survive, they accepted the call of the ancient gods and all transformed into Naga, half-human, half-snake creatures that could survive at the bottom of the sea. Therefore, Nagas were actually creatures with extremely high intelligence. And because the female Naga inherited the beauty of the high elves, their upper bodies were quite beautiful, but their lower bodies were just snake bodies. At this moment, 2 groups of Naga were obviously fighting. As soon as the female Naga at the front saw the murlocs, she shouted in the murloc language, "I command you in the name of Avis to help me block those stupid male Nagas behind me." Chapter 43. What the hell was Avis? Duque didn't know. But he could guess that since the Nagas all originated from the High Elf Queen Azhara and her immediate nobles, this should be the name of a more noble clan among the Nagas. Needless to say, as soon as this name came out, those stupid murlocs all shivered as if they had pissed themselves. They all looked suspiciously at Duque, the emissary of the sea. Humph. Duque snorted coldly. He didn't know why the murlocs were worshipping him, but most of it had to do with the hand of magic he had created. Wasn't it just a competition of hands? Come on. Who's afraid of who? Duque raised his hand, and the system elf linkage was immediately activated. Although Hand of Magic was a level 2 spell after being strengthened, the energy consumption and requirements of this spell were all mediocre level 0 spells. There was no burden at all. In the blink of an eye, 108 hands of magic that were flashing with blue arcane radiance floated in the air neatly in the mysterious formation of wings. His aura was definitely top-notch. The only thing that made Duque dumbfounded was the gestures of these hands of magic. Why the hell were they all raising their middle fingers? What was a forest of middle fingers? This was a forest of middle fingers. The shining middle fingers exuded supreme disdain and contempt. Hey! What's going on? Why are they all middle fingers? Duque roared at the system elf in his heart. This is the gesture I detected the most from the host, and I accidentally automatically set this as the starting gesture for Hand of Magic. Change it. Change it all. From now on, ordinary palms will do. As you will. Fortunately, the international gestures didn't seem to work here. Neither the Murlocs nor the Nagas understood it. However, the Murlocs perfectly misunderstood the gestures that Duque made. After being the servants of high-level aquatic creatures for more than 10,000 years, the merfolk didn't remember many things. However, there was one type of hand gesture that they had to remember. The direction that the leader always used his finger to point in, that could only mean one thing: you scum, attack. Gagagagalalo, this sea god has more hands, he's the real one. Kill the low-level imposter. A 6-armed Naga is more awesome than a 4-armed Naga, and an 8-armed Naga is more awesome than a 6-armed Naga. In any case, in the simple minds of the fishmen, whoever had more hands was the boss. Duque had 108 hands on his side. Duque was definitely a genuine ancient sea god. Regardless of whether Duque believed it or not, the fishmen believed it. Duque's hundreds of magicians' hands seemed to have injected a kind of power into the hearts of these somewhat stupid creatures. That power was called confidence. During the era when the sea creatures were at their strongest, they dominated the entire Azeroth. The sea creatures with multiple arms were like flags on the battlefield. Wherever they were, they represented the will of the sea, absolutely invincible. Contrary to the hide-and-seek battle, just now, the Murlocs were 100 times more courageous. They turned around and charged towards the Nagas like a swarm of bees. The Murlocs were not a pure melee race. Not only were they holding simple spears and other weapons, but there were also many Murloc wise men whose hands emitted the light of magic. The unscientific fact that the Murlocs could use frost arrow magic was also perfectly reflected in the world of Azeroth. Compared to the Murlocs, the Nagas were definitely strong, but they were not strong enough to ignore the number of Murlocs. The leading female Naga's face turned pale. Completely unable to ignore these crazy Murlocs, the female Naga named Avis finally squeezed out a word from her mouth: go. With the ocean behind them, they did not dare to turn back. They could only risk rushing to the mouth of a small river on the left of Duque, attempting to enter the inner part of the western wilderness to take refuge. A smile appeared on the corner of Duque's mouth. He did not stop this group of Nagas. Instead, the finger of the magician's hand did not change, pointing to the group of Nagas behind them. The Murlocs fought with the Nagas behind them. Even if they did not collapse, they would still be food for the Murlocs. Many male Nagas wielding huge tridents danced the weapons in their hands like wind and fire wheels. Every strike could split at least one Murloc in half. But the Murloc's fearlessness shocked them. Once upon a time, as long as one of the Murlocs was lightly stabbed, the rest would die and run away screaming. But now? Although fear and panic could still be seen in their eyes, it could clearly be felt that they were dominated by a darker fear and a stronger will. All of this obviously originated from the human on the beach with many palms of light floating around him. How dare you? A mere human dares to command our Naga servants to attack us? The largest Naga leader was furious. Completely ignoring the frost arrow of the Murloc wise man, he suddenly waved his trident and swept it 3 times in a row, dyeing the surrounding sea red with the blood and internal organs of the Murlocs. He fiercely swung his long, snake-like tail, breaking open a clear white wave mark from far to near on the rippling blue sea surface. In just 20 seconds, he killed through the entire line of Murlocs, killed his way to the shore, and rushed to within 10 steps in front of Duque. Insignificant human. Pay the price for blaspheming the god of the sea, the price is your life. Duque was actually very weak at sea battles. If it was swimming, he was a piece of trash who could swim 50 meters in the pool by himself, and any further would be like playing with weights. Why did he sink into the water? But the Nagas on the shore. Haha. The male Naga who was so mighty just now, with a, there are tens of thousands more like me, look, suddenly panicked. He felt the water around him evaporating at a high speed. Dasong's scorching furnace, activated. Almost in an instant, the originally hot and humid beach under his feet turned into a dry and blazing desert of death. The scorching hot sand stimulated his snake abdomen, which did not have much protection. The sudden increase in temperature made him panic. The water droplets hanging on his scales disappeared with a sizzling sound, leaving a large burn mark on his scales. It was as if there were tens of thousands of invisible little hands, forcibly digging out every water molecule in the gap between his scales and even on his skin. He could clearly see his bulging body rapidly shriveling up. The water that he relied on the most for survival was being forcibly taken away, and his whole body seemed to be in a burning hell of despair. He panicked. No, what kind of sorcery is this? He screamed while trying to throw the trident and stab Duque to death with one move. It was useless. Dozens of blue light hands appeared in the void, pulling him before he could throw the trident. A strong force came from the palms, as if there were dozens of adult strong men holding him down. He was shocked to find that he could not move. Chapter 44. Under the awe-inspiring gaze of hundreds of Murlocs and Nagas, Duque slowly walked up to the Naga leader, raised his right hand gently, and spoke in the clearest Murloc language. As the price for offending me, I will now punish you with the 100 hands of dismemberment. In the next second, nearly 100 hands of magic swarmed forward. The fingernails of these hands of magic, which were shaped like human palms, suddenly sharpened and lengthened, becoming similar to the claws of demons. Every finger was a fatal iron hook. The dark gray scales of the Naga leader were dug off piece by piece and discarded on the beach. His thick and tight skin that ordinary human daggers couldn't pierce was torn off, revealing scarlet muscles and tendons. This wasn't the end. The torture continued. Every piece of muscle, every tendon, had been ripped out alive. Hearing the Naga leader's never-ending screams, both the Murlocs and the Nagas stopped fighting. They watched the massacre in horror and bewilderment. Even Duque himself didn't notice that his expression was so cold at this moment, as if what he was dissecting alive was not a huge humanoid creature that was twice his height, but a live fish. The Naga was very tenacious, and as the male leader, his physique was the strongest in the clan. So, he suffered extra pain. He wailed for a full 5 minutes before he died completely. During this time, the Nagas behind him had already retreated to the depths of the sea without a sound. Only hundreds of Murlocs were still crawling near Duque in awe. When Duque came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that the most majestic Naga had been killed by him. I did this? Duque was also surprised. Host, to be precise, you did it when you entered the cold mode just now, the system elf reminded Duque. This is the complication of losing my moral integrity. When one's humanity is lost to a certain extent, it is indeed easy to have various mental states. But in the mode just now, your casting speed increased by 45%, and your spell strength increased by 32%. If you encounter a strong enemy in the future, I suggest that you enter this state by force, host. Are there any sequelae? Not yet. All right. I'll consider it. After the fight, Duque was a little hungry. His stomach made a grumbling sound. Then, miraculously, the leader of the Murlocs named Yumao presented his treasure. Well, it was a fresh, live fish. System notification: Murloc leader Yumao hopes that you can enjoy fresh silverhead salmon in front of everyone. If you do this, it will help increase the loyalty of these two merfolk tribes. Duque was a little embarrassed. If he remembered correctly, fresh silverhead salmon was a specialty of Stranglethorn Vale. Stranglethorn Vale was in the southern part of the western wilderness. As the leader of the Murlocs, it was not strange for Fish Spear to be captured. Looking at the pitiful eyes of the fishmen, Duque gave in. In any case, salmon was salmon. It wasn't the first time he ate salmon raw. It was a pity that there was no soy sauce or wasabi. Wait a minute. There was wasabi too. Not far from Duque saw a pile of weeds that the Murlocs had gotten from who knows where. There was horseradish among them. After all, horseradish was wasabi after being dried and ground into powder. They usually grew in places like valleys and rivers. Taking the horseradish directly and skipping the grinding step, Duque took out a knife and ate it raw. Duque did not know that this scene was seen by the group of Nagas who had just run to the river. Due to the distance, they could only see Duque make a few gestures on the bloody male Naga, then eat the raw fish. Blarg. A Naga vomited. Devil. This human is definitely a devil. Not only is his magic power extremely powerful, but he also calculated everything accurately. He is also a terrifying existence that dares to eat raw Naga meat. The leader, Avis, was trembling all over. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Suddenly, not far from Avis, there was a Murloc's cry. Not good. I've been discovered. It was too late to silence them. The entire Murloc tribe was in an uproar. The Murlocs who were eager to curry favor with their new master, Duque, had already surrounded the Nagas. Unlike the last time, there were no other targets to help them divert the Murlocs' attention this time. Moreover, they had personally proven that the river was a dead end. Duque smiled. It was absolutely normal for this group of Nagas to be unable to escape. In the entire western wilderness, except for the large river that separated the elven forest and the western wilderness that could be called a river, all the rivers that extended to the sea were small rivers. Not far from the shore, it would become a narrow underground river. Nagas and Murlocs were both aquatic creatures and could not go too far from the shore. After leaving the river, it was the wasteland of the western wilderness and all kinds of monsters. Just now, there were already many corpse shredder birds and vultures circling in the sky. It could be said that this group of Nagas had just run into a dead end by themselves. Naga Avis, are you going to put down your weapons and come over, or should I let the Murlocs carry your bodies over? Duque spoke in the common human language, but he knew that the Nagas would definitely understand. The Nagas, who were born as high elves, were also very talented in languages. Avis bit her lip fiercely. The situation was beyond her control. In the end, she threw down the scepter in her hand and allowed the Murlocs to rush forward and carry away her and her subordinates' weapons. Most of the wounded Nagas stayed a few dozen steps away. Only Avis was brought to Duque, who was sitting on a boulder on the beach. Not daring to look up at Duke, who was on the boulder, Avis glanced at the male Naga who was torn apart alive not far away. He retracted his gaze as if he was startled. He crossed his four smooth arms and bowed. Respected human powerhouse, Vara Ferlin, Avis pays her respects to you. Oh. Ferlin? Why would the Ferlin Nagas of the secret Blood Island come to the western wilderness? Duque had only asked casually, but it set off a storm in Vara's heart. The secret Blood Island was such a secret place that even many human historians did not know about. How did this human mage know about it? All of a sudden, Vara had the terrifying illusion that all her secrets had been seen through by Duque. We are exiles. Exiles. Exiles were the pitiful creatures who had been abandoned by their tribes and could only fend for themselves. Those who did well were like the high elves of Kuel Salis, establishing a new territory and making a name for themselves. Those who did poorly were like Vara in front of him, being hunted down everywhere. May I know your name, sir, and how will you deal with us? Me? Initially, Duque wanted to say it directly, but on second thought, he was a human, and a little mage with no reputation at all. It did not seem right for him to take in a large number of alien underlings at this time, so he randomly made up a name. I am the hundred-handed death god Wuxia. You can call me Lord Hua. Chapter 45. Hundred-handed Reaper. An extremely unfamiliar title. Vara really did not know which big shot in the human kingdom had this title. However, seeing the hundreds of hands of magic that were still floating around Duque, Vara felt that this title was extremely appropriate. Since Duque had announced his name, Vara inexplicably felt a little more at ease. It seemed that this big shot did not intend to kill them. Vara tactfully bowed deeply again. Be glad, Vara, that there is a place for you in my plan. Give me your absolute loyalty and that of your subordinates. As a reward for your loyalty, you will receive a vast place to settle down. The entire coastal waters of the western wilderness will become the territory of your clan, and all the murlocs here will listen to you. As for humans. With me here, humans are not a problem. Duque's words were arrogant and extremely arrogant, but Vara did not think that Duque's words were exaggerated in any way. The murlocs were afraid of the Nagas. For the past 10,000 years, they were willing to be driven by the Nagas, and they only recognized whoever had more arms as the boss. She knew that Duque's hands were all magical creations, but such lifelike and flexible palms were definitely not something that an ordinary mage could do. Feeling the amazing magic aftermath where Duque killed the male Naga leader Nuruk, Vara was secretly shocked. She knew very well that Duque was not an opponent that she could contend with. So, she decided to give her loyalty, even if it was temporary. I, Vara Wrath Scale Elvis, on behalf of the Wrath Scale subclan, would be happy to serve you, master. Vara waved her hand and said a few words to the 30 or so clansmen in the Naga language. Suddenly, all the Nagas knelt to Duque. Get up. As Duque spoke proudly, hands of magic, twice as many as the Nagas, held their elbows and helped them up. For a moment, all the Nagas' expressions changed. After all, they did not see how powerful Duque was. Only the many murlocs were willing to be driven by Duque, and the corpse of Nuruk, who was chasing them, could serve as proof. But at this moment, the invincible power of hand of magic made them shudder. A pair of hands made of magic energy actually had such power. This power could be used to lift them up or strangle them to death. The Naga's reverence for Duque deepened. Duque felt that something was missing after confirming the status of ruler and subject. He suddenly remembered the soul imprint that Mediv had left on his chest. System Elf, can I create a soul imprint similar to Mediv's? According to my calculations, you don't have enough magic power to leave an imprint on the other party's soul in a state of resistance. On the other hand, if the opponent doesn't resist, the mage's mark is just like a level 0 spell. Can you add some material? The system elf instantly understood Duque's thoughts. Sure. At this time, Duque's right index finger shone with a cold white radiance. That was the radiance of a spell of ice energy. Vara, open your heart, I have something to bestow upon you. Now that it was Duque who had the final say, Vara certainly did not dare to resist. She swayed her long snake tail and came in front of Duque. Although Duque's movements seemed to be full of flaws to Vara, he did not even have the most basic mage shield. She clearly felt that she could kill this human who was about to enslave her in one hit, but Vara did not dare. The hands of magic floating around Duque were so elusive that she really did not know how powerful these hands of magic were. She stepped forward respectfully, closed her eyes, and let Duque's fingers touch the center of her eyebrows. As the white radiance passed through her eyelids, it became brighter and brighter, almost to the point where Vara could not bear it. A chill penetrated from the center of her eyebrows into Vara's soul. Ugh! The feeling of coldness was so strong that it almost melted Vara's brain. Vara immediately realized that this was not an ordinary mage's mark. Not only did it invade her soul, but it also stuck to all of her magic circuits. It's over. This time, she really had to be loyal to this little human to the death. At this moment, Vara finally extinguished the last of her little rebellious thoughts. As if in response to Vara's newfound loyalty, Vara suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. She could clearly feel that her ice spells had been significantly improved. It was not the kind of forced increase in power that would have side effects, but a simplified model of the more perfect use of ice spells, imprinted in her soul. In the future, as the years passed and her strength grew, the power of her ice spells would also increase proportionally. This great power, looking at Duque's young face, Vara could not believe that this was Duque's doing. Duque actually imprinted the metamagic expertise that only he could comprehend on his own to her. Vara looked back at the surface of the water and saw the bright emblem on his forehead. It was a black emblem with the skull of the Grim Reaper in the middle. Beside the skull were countless mages' hands that were faintly visible. It really was the emblem of the hundred-handed god of death. Vara no longer had any other thoughts and bowed deeply. Master, what instructions do you have next? Which clan's Naga were chasing you just now? That's the Grey Scale clan from Stranglethorn Vale in the south of the western wilderness, but Master killed their chief warrior. I'm afraid they won't dare to come until we find strong reinforcements. And it will take at least 2 months for Stranglethorn Vale to come here and back, so we shouldn't have to worry about the Grey Scale clan in the short term. All right then. Raven pointed to the huge one-eyed Murloc. In the past month, in addition to settling your clan, you brought Old Blind to bring all the Murlocs on the coast of the western wilderness under your command. When the time comes, I will personally show my power to all the leaders of the Murlocs. What else? I want pearls. Big and small pearls, the more beautiful the better. You let the Fish Spear clan do that. After a week, I will come here again to collect the goods. Until this moment, Duque finally revealed what he was plotting. Yes. Pearls. The world of Azeroth was not the world where pearls were cultivated before Raven came to this world. Pearls were a rare luxury in the 7 human kingdoms, and even in Kuel's Salus of the Elves. It was very simple, all the pearls were in the sea, and the sea was the territory of the Murlocs and Naga. Humans could build powerful warships to conquer all targets on the surface of the sea, but they could do nothing to the bottom of the sea. It was not that no human had any ideas on the Naga, but the Naga's nest was usually at the bottom of the sea. Who would be like Duque and wipe out a whole small tribe? Speaking of which, Duque had only planned to deal with the Murlocs before. Hearing Duque's request, Vara secretly sighed. Different races had different values. Pearls were really not a problem for the Naga. Chapter 46. The wind blew across the wasteland. Yellow soil filled one's eyes. Endless desolation, endless bitterness. As pioneers, the people of Moon Creek Town had to face all sorts of troubles. It was as if trouble had become a part of their lives. Another mine collapse? Another monster in the wilderness? Mountain dog? Corpse shredder bird? Gnoll? Blood-toothed boar? All sorts of monsters became the topic of conversation in the only bar in Moon Creek Town. Under the bright candlelight, the air in the bar was filled with the sour smell of men working all day, the strong smell of alcohol, and the sound of heated discussions. However, there was a new topic of conversation in the bar recently. It was a young wizard called Duke Marcus. I heard that a wizard with the surname Marcus killed Hog. A farmer suddenly asked his companion. That powerful, 2-meter-tall Gnoll Hog? No. It should be 4 meters tall. A few days ago, when I passed by Sentinel Ridge, I saw Hog's headless corpse. It was terrifying. Even though the corpse was already rotten, it was still at least 1.5 stories tall. A peddler who had obviously just returned said. What about the head? The farmer asked. I heard that the head and claws were sent to Stormwind City and Goldflash Town in the Elven Forest for public display. Amazing. Quang Gong sighed. Of course. Lord Duke Marcus is the second genius in Stormwind's history to become an official wizard with a 9th grade talent. The middle-aged mercenary interrupted, pride written all over his face. Moon Creek Town was not big. There were only 1,000 people in the town. Even if he did not know their names, he could still recognize them. Oh. Do you know that Lord Marcus? Of course. I'm his subordinate. The mercenary said without hiding anything. Come on. The followers of the wizard are all very strong, even stronger than our town's #1 knight, Rillick. Quang Gong ridiculed the mercenary. But in the next moment, Quang Gong was speechless. It should be said that everyone in the bar was speechless. Yo, Makarov, you're here. An ordinary greeting with a dazzling entrance. His blue and white mage robe and dazzling mage emblem proved his identity, but the 5 sharp icicles hovering above his shoulders deepened everyone's impression of him. It was illogical for the icicles to float in the air, but if it was on the body of a powerful mage, then it would become reasonable no matter how illogical it was. Sir Marcus, you are, oh, this is just a part of my self-cultivation, Duque replied casually. Makarov did not pursue the matter any further. He did not understand the world of the mages even if he listened. However, this did not stop him and the people around him from feeling that even though they did not understand it, they still felt that it was amazing. Makarov stared blankly at the bag in Duque's hand. Let's talk upstairs. Makarov had already arrived, along with a few of his men. Makarov led Duque to his room, and a few of his men guarded the door. Below, the rest of the people in Moon Creek Town were in an uproar. Wow, that's Duke Marcus. So young. What a promising young man. Why did he come to Moon Creek Town? There's nothing good in the western wilderness that could attract such a big shot like him, right? Could it be that he found a new mineral or specialty? How is that possible? What else is there in the western wilderness apart from various crops and a few ordinary iron and copper mines? None of them expected that Duque had really developed a new specialty for the western wilderness. Inside the room, Makarov and the other mercenaries were dazzled by the treasures on the table. Pearls, pearls of all sizes. From the smallest pearls that did not have much luster, to the small lustrous pearls, to the more precious, black pearls, and finally to the most dazzling, golden pearls, which were the size of an infant's fist. So many pearls almost made Makarov's heart stop beating. Of course, apart from the pearls, there were also all kinds of beautiful corals, transparent yellow tortoise shells, but the most dazzling were the pearls. This is the specialty of the western wilderness that I developed. I intend to establish a shipping route and name it the Pearl Route. Hiss, the mercenaries simultaneously gasped. A shipping route. It was not something that could be done in one go. A shipping route meant that Duque's pearls would have a stable source of income. Makarov, who was the most knowledgeable among them, could not help but feel suspicious. Please forgive my presumptuousness, but the entire coast of the western wilderness is filled with murlocs that can never be completely killed. Sir, how did you? Oh. Well, it was a coincidence that I controlled a murloc tribe. The murlocs were the ones who collected the pearls for me. Ah. Makarov could not help but cry out in shock. Legend had it that mages would rear strange familiars as their servants, but the murlocs. Moreover, the murlocs were crude, cruel, and had low intelligence. This was inconceivable. However, from the moment they met, Makarov realized that the youth in front of him was a person who could turn the impossible into the possible. From the initial shock, he had become a little numb, even blindly believing. Sir, is there anything I can do for you? I've already paid for a batch of ships from Old Jackson at the Stormwind shipyard. They should be ready by now. Bring me as many as we have. The sailors can be found at the head of the horses. The first batch of boatmen will be paid double, to be paid in full before the ship sets sail. Also, be sure to plant my flag on the bow of every ship. Looking at the few flags that Duque took out, Makarov was a little suspicious, but he did not ask. Instead, he asked, "What about you, sir?" "I can't leave for now. As for the money, you can sell the pearls here first." "No, no, no. Sir, you still have a lot of money left from killing Hog, it's enough to hire sailors. I don't know the price of pearls, so it's better for you to handle it yourself." Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Indeed, there were too few people who could work for him. This was an era where illiterate people walked everywhere. It was easy to find a muscular man, but difficult to find someone with brains. Most civilians would not deal with merchants unless they had no other choice. However, Duque could not leave. As long as the threat from the Naga tribe was not resolved, there would be no peace here. "Then let's do it. But bring some back as proof that I opened up the Pearl route. Also, help me find Mage Norton from the Royal Magic Academy, and ask him to help me apply for the exclusive rights of this route." "Exclusive rights? That seems. You think the nobles will interfere?" "Sir is wise." Makarov was a yes man. "Don't worry, let them come." Duque's black eyes flashed with a cruel light. Chapter 47. After Duque became famous for killing Hog, Duque once again became famous in Stormwind City for another matter, the Pearl Sea route. The influence and coverage of these two matters were completely different. No matter how powerful Hog was, he was still a monster in the Elven Forest. To the upper echelons of Stormwind, Hog was just a small local problem. The appearance of the Pearl Sea route not only shocked the entire circle of nobles in Stormwind City, but even King Lang was alarmed. In the heart of the Stormwind Kingdom, in the Stormwind stronghold of the Stormwind City, the magnificent white marble floor reflected the morning sun. In the octagonal reception hall of the royal family, the guards of the royal family stood upright with sharp halberds in their hands. Their helmets were bright, and their eyes were sharp. Their expressions were firm, and their vigilant gazes proved that they could deal with any danger. They were the elites that Anduin Lothar had trained and trained. Ever since the royal knights were handed over to Lothar, Lothar's performance had never disappointed King Lang. It had been 20 years since he ascended to the throne at the age of 20. With a head of black and brown curly hair, a chiseled, manly face, and a pair of friendly yet dignified eyes, Lang looked extremely heroic in his prime. Sitting on a gold-rimmed throne on a white base, with a gold-rimmed blue lion flag printed with the emblem of the Storm Kingdom behind him, Ryan was reading a report. The Pearl Sea route in the Western Wilderness? Earth Mage Duke Marcus wants to obtain exclusive rights to this route that he opened up. Valid for 10 years. Anduin, I seem to have heard of this name somewhere. King Lang tilted his head and looked at his good friend, who was also his most loyal and reliable subject. Lothar had a handsome face, and his eyes were always exuding determination. Every curve of his face was so perfect, and it was a perfect representation of the word masculine. His long black curly hair would look messy on anyone else, but on Lothar, it was a special kind of masculine charm. They were both handsome men, but the biggest difference between Anduin and Lang was probably their skin color. Anduin, who trained outdoors all year round, had a darker complexion and was healthier. On the other hand, Lang's complexion was pale due to the lack of sunlight. As a childhood friend of King Lang, Lothar was also in the prime of a man's life. Full of energy and experience, he was at the age to do great things. Anduin Lothar took the report and quickly scanned through it. He nodded and said, "It is indeed him. I have just submitted a report to your majesty." Duke Marcus was the second 9th grade magic apprentice in the history of our country, and he became an Earth Magus on the day he entered the academy. He is a once-in-a-century genius of our country. He also belongs to the Wang clan's mage squad. Clayan smiled. His smile had the warmth of spring. If this Pearl Sea route is real, then the Pearl Sea route won't be a problem. Then our country's future finances will be much better. There are monsters running amok in the Elven Forest, and a lot of the taxes that should be paid cannot be collected. You have been urging me to renovate the walls of Stormwind City, and it seems that the money has been settled. But I have a question. Your Majesty, please ask. Lothar bowed gracefully. My internal affairs advisor always tells me that unless I spend half of the annual income of the treasury to support a fleet that is no less than a third of the fleet of the powerful maritime power Kurtiras, I should not even think about the sea. Why can this Marcus guarantee the safety of a route? The application did not explain. But I will investigate thoroughly. Lang's finger gently flicked the report. I admire this young man who is determined to open up. If he can bring in a stable annual tax revenue for the kingdom, I can only charge him 10% of the tax. Well, Lothar, help me warn those ignorant fellows. I do not want to destroy the seedlings of the kingdom. Understood, Your Majesty. Lothar retreated with one hand on his shoulder. Duque did not know that he had already received the joint attention of King Lang and Anduin. He was now on a deserted island on the coast of the western wilderness, quietly listening to Vara's report. The female Naga Siren chief seemed to have adapted to her new role. Her submissive attitude made Duque feel very comfortable. Master, we have collected more than 3,300 pearls of various kinds, among which the most valuable are 31 golden pearls, and 125 black pearls. May I ask, do you want to ship them all at once? Duque waved his hand. There is no need for that. Leave a tenth here. I want to do hunger marketing. What hunger marketing? Duque was speechless. Forget it, this is something you will not understand even if I tell you. However, you have to remember, do not conquer the 3 merfolk tribes closest to Stormwind City. Only send people to escort the ships with my magic imprint. The trading point will be set here in the future. When humans land on the island, leave a male Naga Siren behind as a handover. Understood, my master. You may leave first. Yes. In the distance, 3 small cargo ships entered Duque's field of vision. Apart from Makarov, there was also an unexpected figure that entered Duque's field of vision. As the ship got closer, Duque knew that what he saw was not an illusion. There was a dignified lady with her blonde hair tied up at the back of her head. She wore an aqua blue dress, and compared to Makarov and the other young sailors in dirty shirts and shorts, she was of a completely different world. The 30-ton boat did not need a special dock, and it was not too much of a problem to dock on the beach. Taking advantage of the ebb tide, the newly hired captain rushed the boat onto the beach. That way, after the cargo was loaded, it would be easy to get the boat into the sea when the tide rose. Almost as soon as the boat stopped, the lady jumped down excitedly. The middle-aged lady could not be considered a beauty. Under her relatively flat forehead was a pair of slender eyes, and the tips of her eyebrows were slightly raised. Her eyes were clear but not lacking in shrewdness, and her small nose was sharp and straight. One look and anyone could tell that she was an extremely independent person. However, she had a unique temperament. She had the keen sense of a merchant, and the dignified air of a lady made one feel very comfortable. She quickly walked in front of Duque and obediently gave Duque a ladylike bow. Hello, you must be Sir Duke Marcus? I am Duque. May I ask who you are, madam? I am Jones, Elizabeth Jones, the only jewel processing supplier in Stormwind City. I heard that you have a large number of pearls, and I think that we should be able to reach a pleasant cooperation. Elizabeth Jones. This was a name that Duque did not know. However, Duke knew that there was a certain Isabel Jones who would become the jewelry processing supplier of New Stormwind City at some point in time. Chapter 48. Duque was not flattered by the other party's recommendation. If Duque was said to be a rising star with a promising future when he first became an Earth mage. But now, Duque already had signs of moving from a comet that flashed across the sky to a star. Not having enough money to support Duque's studies in magic was the biggest shackle that restricted Duque's growth. But what if this shackle was removed? Duque could become an immeasurable new force in Stormwind City. His noble identity as a mage allowed him to transcend the aristocratic forces, and his identity as a mage meant that he could not spend too much time on business activities. Therefore, Elizabeth Jones's visit had a deeper meaning other than to discuss cooperation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to this barren little island in person. "Hello, Jones." Duke was gentle and polite. He didn't show too much enthusiasm, but he didn't keep people at arm's length. Elizabeth Jones was an elegant lady in her 30s. When she heard about Duque's age, she thought that Duque would be easier to talk to, but she realized that she was wrong the moment the conversation began. Duque was clearly not the kind of inexperienced brat who would lose his bearings after a few compliments. Therefore, Elizabeth decided to treat Duque as an equal and a business partner. She asked Duque in a very ladylike tone, "May I know the quality, quantity, and method of obtaining your pearls, sir?" Duque snapped his fingers. Then, there was the sound of splashing water. The sudden appearance of the Murloc startled Jones and Duque's newly hired sailors. The sailors were almost ready to fight. Because it was Murlocs. Colorful fish-like bodies accompanied by strong limbs, the two Murlocs grandly raised a huge shell and walked in front of Duque and Jones under everyone's gaze. They put down the shell and knelt before Duque. Duke's mouth emitted a strange, "oh la ha ha ha" sound, and then the two fishmen happily ran back into the sea with strange steps. Two palms glowing with arcane magic appeared, scaring the hearts of Jones and the sailors again. Duque chuckled and opened the shell with hand of magic. Under the morning light, the dazzling array of pearls in the large shell that could fit a 5-year-old child almost dazzled Elizabeth Jones' eyes. In her eyes, it was as if countless beautiful and dazzling new pearl jewelry had appeared. Only the sailors secretly exclaimed in low voices, "My God! Our employer, Sir Marcus, has actually subdued the fishmen. Those barbaric, evil Murlocs that hunt humans nearby?" Duque raised his hand, and the whispers of the sailors immediately stopped. "Madam Jones, the situation is as you can see. Because I've studied the merfolk language, I've used a certain method to control 3 merfolk tribes on the north coast of the western wilderness. They will collect a steady stream of pearls, corals, hawksbill shells, and a series of valuable marine specialties for me." Duque turned his head and smiled at the sailors. "Similarly, a ship with my wizard imprint hanging on the bow is absolutely safe in the sea between Stormwind City's harbor and here. Not only will the merfolk not attack you, but they will also protect you from the attacks of other marine life. Of course, going to sea is risky. The merfolk cannot resist powerful marine life that surpasses their combat strength." For a moment, whether it was Jones or the sailors, their hearts warmed up. As if reluctant to part with them, Jones picked up one pearl after another, examined them over and over, and then smiled. "Then, Sir Marcus, shall we go back to Stormwind City and discuss in detail?" "Very well." Leaving Stormwind City by land, going south to Gold's Higher Town, then west through West Spring Stronghold into the western wilderness, and finally to the northern beach, it would take a full week. It was extremely simple to go by sea. Starting from Stormwind City's harbor and following the southwest coastline, it would only take 1 day. Waiting was boring. In fact, in the ship's narrow cabin, Duque had basically reached a cooperation agreement with Elizabeth. This was a 10-year contract. From now on, Duque had to guarantee a supply of no less than 1,000 pearls to Elizabeth Jones' jewelry store every year. As the raw material supplier, Duque could receive 40% of the final sale price of the pearl jewelry. The price was mutually agreed upon by both parties when Duque delivered the goods. When delivering the goods, Duque delivered the goods and received the money at the same time. After Duque delivered the first batch of pearls, Elizabeth needed to pay an additional 10,000 gold coins to Duque as a signing bonus for obtaining the exclusive right to sell Duque's pearl route. In the cabin, Elizabeth's attendant handed over the wine symbolizing the happy cooperation. Duque and Elizabeth lightly clinked their glasses to show the happy cooperation. "Seriously, Sir Marcus, I have to remind you that I will earn more than you can imagine with this kind of cooperation. If you are willing to accept after-sales settlement, quarterly settlement, you can at least double your current wealth. Duque gently swirled the liquor in the goblet, letting the aroma of the alcohol escape, and sniffed it lightly. For businessmen, it is instinct to pursue greater profits. But I am a mage first, and then the master of the pearl route. I understand what you mean. It is because we value different things that we have such a pleasant cooperation. Indeed. Duque's smile was a bit thought-provoking. And you bought my pearls with a buyout, which also took a considerable risk. It is not unacceptable for me to sell them at a lower price. Although a little sorry, I still want to say that, Sir Marcus, you have a maturity that does not match your age. Nonsense. This young master is a university animal. Although he was complaining in his heart, Duque felt a little guilty. He did not know how long Jones could earn from this pearl business. He only knew that if the orcs came and Stormwind City fell, it was estimated that Jones would lose a lot. Unfortunately, for the future of Stormwind City, amen. Good luck. With the help of Elizabeth Jones, Duque's pearls became the new favorite of Stormwind City's socialites in a very short time. Almost all the upper-class aristocrats in Stormwind City knew that Duke Marcus had a hen that laid golden eggs. Yet, no one could intervene. It was not that no aristocrats had the idea of the pearl route. The fishing boats they secretly sent were attacked by the merfolk without exception, suffering heavy casualties. And Duque said that the merfolk were not under his control and had nothing to do with him. In this way, Duque set foot on the steps of the library of the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy with a huge wealth that made others envious. Facing the librarian, who told him that copying every spell here cost money, Duque only said one sentence: "Please pack it up. I want all the spells of the Earth Mage rank." Chapter 49. He had seen a tycoon before. He had never seen such a tycoon. Not only was he rich, but he was also a little stupid. The manager was an old man who looked like he was about to die. Although his face was full of wrinkles and he looked like a Shar-Pei, Duque could clearly feel the abundant arcane energy in the old man's body. The system elf had determined that the old man's power level was also Crimson Skeleton. In other words, this old man who looked like he would choke to death when he swallowed his saliva was actually a boss-level existence whose power was far above Duque's. Duque was embarrassed. Should he say that Stormwind City was the second most powerful human magic holy land after the Dalajan? Young man, I know you are talented, but no matter how talented you are, you can't master the entire ocean of magic. The magic here can be divided into 9 major schools: defense, conjuring, divination, enchantment, and evocation. Take the evocation school that you are most familiar with. Evocation is the shaping of energy. It is also divided into fire, ice, arcane, and other minor schools. I know that. You know that there are so many schools, but you still want to learn all of them? Do you know that even if you can learn all the level 2 spells that an earth mage can learn, learning so many spells will at least make your beard grow an inch longer? It's not that exaggerated. Duque looked like he didn't care about level 2 spells at all. He kept saying that magic was actually easy to learn, and even bragged that he was a 9th grade talent genius. In fact, it was to hide the fact that he had the system to learn magic in an instant. As he spoke, to prove that he was not lying, Duque even drew a level 2 spell, ice armor, and demonstrated it to the old man. Instantly connecting to the ice elemental realm, a large amount of cold air gathered from the void and condensed on Duque's body. Cold white light gushed out of his arms and quickly covered Duque's arms at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only his arms, but his legs and body also flashed with a cold white light. The white light flowed and covered Duque's body and limbs. It was almost impossible for an ordinary mage to learn a spell formula the moment they came into contact with it. Even if a Breaking Dawn mage were to come into contact with a rank 2 spell that they had never seen before and learn it on the spot, not everyone could do it. It would already be impressive if the other ice armors had the appearance of armor that could protect the mage's vitals. What about Duque? A mere ice armor spell was actually made into something fancy by him. The Monarch Plate armor set, it was the Storm City Guard full-body armor set, impressively appeared in front of the old man. Layers of orderly pauldrons, bright breastplates, solid waist armor. It was already very good to be able to create these with the ice armor spell. Do you know what Duque created? He had even created a chain armor that was made of small iron rings that interlocked with each other to protect his upper arms. As for the majestic and mighty lion head carvings on his belt and gauntlets, he naturally didn't pull them down. Apart from the lack of color and the fact that it was made of ice, it was the standard equipment of Storm City soldiers. With one look, the old man no longer had any doubts about Duque's talent and abilities. He was only filled with shock and resentment. Was magic that easy to cultivate? If it was that easy, the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy wouldn't need to send out a large number of people every year to select apprentices from all over the country. Tens of thousands of youths participated in the test every year, but only a few dozen people were able to be tested for magic aptitude. Most of these people didn't have enough aptitude. Even if they couldn't be nurtured into official mages, it would be good to find some apprentices to help them. That was why they were reluctantly recruited into the Magic Academy. With time, they could become official Earth mages before the age of 40, and then join the mage team as a fighting force. Hence, in the Magic Academy, apprentices in their 40s and 50s were not rare. Thus, Duque's age was considered very young even among apprentices, let alone official mages. When Duque gave up on becoming Mediva's disciple, the old man was still resentful. A good seedling had been destroyed just like that. But how long had it been? A month. In just a month, Duque's strength had risen from a level 1 Earth mage to a level 5 mage. If it were any other mage, such rapid progress would have caused problems with their magic circuits being disrupted, or damaged due to overexertion. But what about Duque? He could clearly feel the elemental power flowing slowly and orderly in Duque's body. The extremely gentle elements hid an unimaginable violence. As long as Duque wanted to, these elements could turn into the fiercest flames or frost at any time and attack Duque's enemies. It had only been a month. Was a month a lot of time? Even if Duque had been accepted as a core disciple by Mediv from the start, he wouldn't have been able to make such terrifying and solid progress in a month. Even the guardian Mediv, who was known as the most talented, had only improved at such a rate. When Mediv was young, he had been carefully guided by the strongest mage in Azeroth at the time, his mother, Aegwynn. And the old man himself had trained from a level 1 Earth Master to a level 5 mage, which took him a year and a half. And this was in Stormwind, the second most powerful mage nation in the human world, second only to the Dalajan. For those roaming mages in small places who couldn't receive orthodox magic education, if they relied on their own research and training, it would be a matter worth celebrating if anyone could make such progress in 5 years. Faced with Duque, the old man was completely speechless. To make such rapid progress in a month and have such a solid foundation, this was not only a shock to him. More importantly, it was a blow to him. Comparisons were odious. Was a level 9 talent really so frightening and amazing? The old man's heart was hit hard. Taking another glance at Duke, who looked as though it was a matter of course and did not look happy at all, the old man thought to himself, even if this kid were to be placed among the high elves, he would still be a monster-level fellow. Duque didn't have time to care about the old man's thoughts. He was stunned by the spell list of the Royal Magic Academy. He really couldn't figure out if the original game had deliberately reduced the number of spells for mages to become a pure attack and crowd control mage class, or if Azeroth had so many spells to begin with. Spell type, Grease, Fog Concealment, Prophecy type, Identify, Enchantment type, Hypnosis. When the old man brought over a large pile of spell books, which was as tall as a small mountain, and showed a teasing expression, Duque really felt his scalp tingle. But since he had made such a big statement, he had to learn it. He had to pretend to be cool to the end even if he had to hold back his tears. Chapter 50. Duque had indeed learned such a large number of spells on the spot. Logically speaking, there was no need for him to take these spell manuals back. However, seeing the old librarians, "If you don't respect magic, I'll make things difficult for you next time," look, Duque retreated in defeat. Moreover, Duque discovered something that was rather serious for him, and that was the limits of the system elf. As it turned out, the system elf was a thing of the scientific side. For magic that could be explained by science, the system elf was at the level of a god. For example, ice and fire magic, the system elf could not only help Duque learn spells in an instant, but it could also immediately derive a large number of metamagic abilities, increasing the power of magic in all aspects. Some categories that did not feel scientific, or were in a direction that Duque was unfamiliar with, such as the enchantment spell, hypnosis, was deemed unable to identify by the system. As for the divination spell, which allowed the user to understand what the other party was saying, but could not read or write, language proficiency, the system's feedback was not in line with the principles of translation, unable to identify. The most special spell, necromancy, was directly told by the system that it could not be used due to the lack of unknown conditions. Duque could only carry a large pile of spell manuals back to the dormitory that the academy had arranged for him, and slowly study them by himself. Basically, he had memorized all the spells. It was not that he could not use them, but it lacked the amazing feeling of mastering them on the first try. Duque knew that he was being too demanding. The old librarian had clearly told him that all kinds of magic casting techniques and metamagic abilities would be passed on to their disciples by mentors, and they would not be able to learn the essence of it outside. At most, they would learn some basic techniques in public lessons given by mentors to the entire academy. If he wanted to learn, that was fine, but it was an equivalent exchange. The problem was that Duque had previously rejected Mediv. Other than Old Man Norton, no mentor would be willing to exchange magic techniques with him. The most important thing was that Duque suddenly realized that the overall standard of magic in the academy was not high. Other than Mediv, there were only 2 Morning Star wizards in the entire academy, and there were no magic books above level 5 in the academy's library. If he wanted to learn more advanced magic, he would either go to the Dalajan, or go to Karazhan. Yes, Medivh's old nest, Karazhan, which was currently under the control of the Burning Legion's boss, Sardras. As a guardian, as well as the son and successor of the previous guardian, Aegwin, Mediv had a private mage tower in Karazhan. The southern part of the Elven Forest was the Twilight Forest, and the southeastern part of the Twilight Forest was the Headwind Path. Karazhan was located in the Headwind Path. That place was equivalent to Medivh's fief, and outsiders were forbidden from entering. If Duque had been willing to be Medivh's disciple, he would have been able to enter. But at the same time, it was very likely that he would have been swallowed whole. This is the upper limit of the Storm Royal Magic Academy. How do I break through this limit? Just as Duque was feeling a little melancholy, there was a knock on the dormitory door. Who? Duque, it's me. Darnielle and Nitana are here too. Come in. Duque, who was buried in the pile of books, stretched out his right hand. The arcane power in the magic circuit flowed gently, and he cast a small magic trick. Transmutation, switch. The lock of the door, which was 10 meters away, was opened by Duque. Click. The door opened. Darnielle and Nitana were a little surprised that Duque, who was supposed to open the door, was sitting so far away. Darnielle stretched his thick neck, as if he wanted to see if there was anyone else behind the door, or if Duque had hired a servant. Darnielle, it's just a switch, Nitana reminded him in a small voice. Darnielle smiled and scratched his head, then strode in. Because Darnielle's body was too big, taking up 2/3 of the aisle, Nitana could only follow behind like a follower. Looking up from the pile of books, Duque found that Darnielle looked relieved. What's wrong? Nothing, I just realized that you have a human side, Duque. I thought you didn't need to learn anything and could directly advance to the level of Guardian Mediv. Pfft, it was Nitana who laughed. Duque could only helplessly open his hands. Okay, you've come to me. Is it about Mentor Norton? Both of them nodded at the same time. My mentor just finished his research and informed us that you were back. He asked us to tell you that the notes were translated. Thank you. Duque smiled. He turned to look at their robes and smiled even more brilliantly. Darnielle had the symbol of 2 small books on his chest, and Itana had 3. This was the symbol of a junior apprentice and an intermediate apprentice in the Royal Magic Academy. The level of an apprentice only reflected their aptitude. Only the number of book symbols reflected the status of an apprentice. Of course, there were those who were stuck at the higher level for a long time. Facing Duque's gaze, Itana was embarrassed. We can't compare to you. No. Since we came out from the Northshire Abbey together, we should take care of each other. I'll go to Mentor Norton first. We'll have a good chat later. It wasn't just the straightforward Darnielle. Even Itana could not hide the joy on her face. It couldn't be helped. Duque had been in the limelight recently. First, he killed Hogg, and then opened up the Pearl Sea route all by himself. Even their mentors hinted to them to interact more with Duque. Just like that, they followed Duque to Wizard Norton's private laboratory in the north of the academy. Only Morning Star wizards and above were allowed to build their own wizard tower within the boundaries of the academy. As a sky wizard, Old Man Norton only had a stand-alone house with its own courtyard as a laboratory. As if sensing Duque's arrival, the door to the courtyard automatically opened to the left and right. The stairs that should have led to the main entrance of the hall on the first floor suddenly bulged upwards, turning into a staircase that led to the 3rd floor. Just as Duque stood on the first step, he suddenly heard a voice, "Stand still." In the next second, the entire staircase was like an escalator, sending Duque up to the 3rd floor. At the end of the staircase was a circular window. Just as Duque was about to reach the 3rd floor, it suddenly opened in a spiral shape. Through the bright light, Duque saw Old Norton sitting on a recliner, using a magnifying glass to look at his notes. "You're here?" "I'm here. I heard you had a good harvest in the western wilderness. Mentor Norton, do you need funds for your research?" "I can." Old Norton waved his hand. "I'm old and have lost my motivation. I don't need those things." At this moment, Duque felt a never-before-felt lethargy from the old man. What had happened to the old man? Old Wizard Norton raised his head and looked at Duque. He suddenly laughed. "It's nothing. I just saw my limits and the possibilities you have. Even if I'm not qualified to be your mentor, I still hope that you can accept my inheritance." Chapter 51. Duque was stunned. The breath that he exhaled from his nose and mouth was full of surprise. The old man looked at Duque, his seemingly old and muddy eyes gleaming with wisdom. The furnishings in the room were very simple. Soft beige walls, 2 comfortable armchairs, and a low coffee table. That was everything. It was so simple that it was impossible to find anything else to distract his attention from the other party. After a short moment of surprise, Duque looked at the old mage who gave him a chance and a new start in the world of Azeroth. It was a very complicated look. There was the disappointment of giving up, but there was also the hope of placing his hopes on someone else. In the old man's face, Duque seemed to see the last wish of an old man who was obsessed with magic and struggled for his whole life but did not achieve much. Duque could not bear to reject the hope of this old man who was at the end of his life and finally nodded. "If you agree, I'll call you teacher from now on." Old Man Norton felt like he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled as if his ears were not working well and he was hearing things. His eyes widened in disbelief. What? The arrogant kid who looked down on the world's most powerful mage, Medivh, actually called me teacher? Happiness came so suddenly that the old man could not believe it. Duque, that. I really wanted to be your teacher. But Medivh. That. Actually. The old man was a little incoherent. Duque stepped forward and grabbed Old Man Norton's hand. Don't underestimate yourself. If it wasn't for your suggestion at Northshire Abbey, I might have been beaten to death by that fellow Brando. As for my refusal to be Mediva's disciple, it's not just because of ambition. There's a deeper reason. You'll understand my difficulties in the future. The old man's mouth trembled and his eyes became moist. In the end, the old man did not cry. Instead, he let out a long sigh. Please forgive this old man who knows a little magic but has no courage. I'm really ashamed to be your teacher. If I want to be your teacher, I should use my body to be your safe haven. At that moment, I didn't stand up. I knew that I would never have the chance to be your teacher. However, I will be honored to be your guide into the Hall of Magic. Seeing that the old man had made up his mind, Duque could only nod. A teacher and a guide were two completely different concepts. But that was all they could do. Old Norton immediately put on a stern face. He took out the High Elf Mage Apprentice Handbook, with one hand and a translation that he had written himself. I've carefully studied this, beginner's handbook, for a long time, and I found that for the past 1,000 years, mankind's research in the field of magic has actually taken a detour. Detour? Yes. Traditional magic training was nothing more than teaching talented kids a lot of magic knowledge and letting them communicate with the magic energy in the elemental realm or other alien worlds. Then, they would guide the magic energy into their own bodies through meditation to transform themselves and form magic circuits. After that, they would train day after day, making the magic circuits thick and strong. At this point, the old man pointed at the elven language on the handbook and suddenly spat. This is indeed the safest way to train. 1,000 years ago, when humans had no contact with magic, this method was indeed the safest and most secure way to train. But the cunning elves left something up their sleeves. Left something up their sleeves? Duque pricked up his ears. Yes. Left something up their sleeves. Do you know why high elves are naturally better at magic than humans? Duque frowned. Race's innate talent? Of course this is one of the reasons, but there's another reason, the sun well. Duque immediately realized something. You mean, yes. Actually, for a good seedling with a strong physique, the foundation of magic can be built up quickly. No, even an acolyte with an average physique can easily rise to the level of a morning star wizard. The prerequisite is that they need a source of highly concentrated magic to transform their bodies day and night, and it has to be the body of a child whose body is still in its puberty. Duque felt a headache coming on. Where was he going to find a sunwell? That thing was tightly guarded by the high elves, and they would fight anyone who tried to touch it. He did not think that he had the ability to deal with the Sun King in Cuel Salis. At this moment, Old Man Norton patted Duque's shoulder. I'm willing to bet that even the person who gave you this, apprentice's handbook, did not realize that he had given you such a shocking treasure trove. Duque added in his heart, it's she, not he. The first 49 pages are essentially no different from the human wizard apprentice training manuals. At most, they're more refined. But the last page. The old man flipped to the last page of the handbook. Duque did not know Elven, but this did not stop him from noticing that the Elven words had suddenly become sloppy. It was completely different from the fair and elegant handwriting at the front, and seemed to be very casual. The old man also flipped open Duque's translation book. Duque realized that the last page had not been translated. Do you know why I didn't translate it? Duque shook his head. Because the Elven language on this page is nonsensical. The old man narrowed his eyes and smiled. It's just like how you created a pearl course out of thin air. I was also suddenly enlightened. This is not a language at all, but a special magic circuit layout. The old man suddenly became excited. Haha. It just so happened that I, an arcana expert, discovered the secret on it. This is a special magic circuit design that can absorb the surrounding arcana energy into the body like a vortex. This. Duque was surprised. And this is a completely different magic circuit cultivation method that is commonly used by the elves. It has a more extensive magic circuit expansion method for the absorption of arcana energy. I don't know why the Sun King hinted to Prince Kale that's to cultivate like this, but this is undoubtedly a help to you. If you cultivate according to this, you can quickly increase and strengthen your magic circuit even without the Sunwell. As soon as Old Man Norton said this, Duque immediately understood why. According to the history of the game, in the near future, Kuel's Salus would fall, and all the remaining High Elves would fall into a strong addiction to arcana energy. As the king of the High Elves, Sun King Anastrian certainly knew how bad the addiction of the Sunwell was for the elves. So he sent Kale, that's to the Dalajan to study, which was also a disguised way to give Kale, that's more hope and a broader future. However, the Sun King did not expect that his little selfishness, which he thought could not be discovered, would flow into the hands of Aurelia, and then to Duque. Duque suddenly sighed. Aurelia was really his benefactor. Chapter 52. Old Man Norton handed over Kale, that's Mage Apprentice Handbook. Duque, put your hand on it. Don't resist the illusion given to you inside. This will be a very precious inheritance. Duque gently placed his hand on it, and a system notification immediately appeared. Host, unknown nervous system transmission detected. After examination, the risk is less than 3%. Do you accept the transmission? Yes. As a strange blue arcane energy was injected into the last page from the old man's hand, the elvish characters on the page seemed to come to life. They wriggled and twisted on the page, then began to combine with each other, shuttling back and forth, forming new arcane patterns. Detected a new magic circuit construction method. Function: enhance the absorption of arcane energy. After examination, it will greatly increase the host's absorption of arcane energy from the two branches of evocation, arcane and fire. It is recommended that the host synchronously polarize part of his arcane circuit. The system elf still faithfully performed its duty. Duque's vision was completely replaced, and an illusion of a starry sky appeared in front of him. Even the existence of Duque seemed to have disappeared. He didn't need to breathe, didn't need to think. It felt as if his entire body had transformed into thousands of thin mental threads. He could clearly feel that his spirit was being stimulated by an inexplicable force. In every thread of his spirit, there was magical power surging wave after wave like the tide. Then, countless mental threads began to intertwine, forming what looked like braids, and these braids intertwined to form an even larger strip. The barrier between the mental threads melted at some point, and the small threads became small tubes. Then, the small tubes merged into an even larger tube. When the tube became incomparably thick in Duque's vision, finally, the long tube wound into a closed circle that connected the end to the end. Duque could clearly see that the radiance of arcane energy was surging in the huge tube. They kept hitting and slapping the scab-like barrier at the end of the tube that had already been fused into one. It seemed that the arcane energy in the tube was not enough to break through this barrier. But at the last moment, an indescribable external mental wave rose again. It was as if after climbing the highest peak of a mountain, an illusory higher peak suddenly appeared in the clouds, pulling up Duque's imagination and understanding of power by more than a level. No, this was definitely not an ordinary technique, where there was always a mountain higher than the previous one. Not only did Duque feel the old man's power, but there was also an unfamiliar and mysterious power. That power was filled with a gentle feeling of heat. He suddenly realized, this was probably the mental power left behind by the High Elf Sun King Anastrian. Duque didn't know if Kale, that's had enjoyed this benefit before. In any case, this mental power was now all for Duque's benefit. A gigantic circular magic circuit model appeared in his spiritual sea. At this moment, Duque's body was like a 3D printer, perfectly replicating himself according to the model, like a projection. One line, one side, one three-dimensional, slowly projected, slowly shaped. Duque could see that this was no longer a simple magic circuit. There were also countless mysterious blue pentagrams on the magic circuit. After these symbols took shape, they began to absorb the free arcane energy in the surrounding air like the suckers of an octopus. The colorful light spots were filtered by the pentagrams on the circuit and then entered the circuit. They were already pure arcane energy. Although the light spots that were absorbed were like thin soap bubbles, they were indeed increasing the total amount of arcane energy in the circuit. Not only did it increase the energy, but it also strengthened the pulse in the circuit. Unlike the blood vessels in the human body that simply bore the burden of blood, the arcane energy that flowed at a high speed was actually quietly expanding the width of the circuit, making it wider and the walls of the circuit more elastic and thicker. In his trance, Duque seemed to hear the voice of Old Man Norton. The voice was a little blurred, as if separated by a thick curtain of water, with an incredible echo. He was still sure that it was the old man's voice. Little lunatic. I only asked you to learn how to build your own magic circuit, not to do it on the spot. Crazy. Crazy. Really crazy. Duque knew very well that a huge magic circuit had already taken shape in his body. It was the most basic, arcane circuit, in the magic circuit. Just like in the game, arcane circuit was the engine of a mage's magic energy. A mage's talent was either arcane magic plus frost or arcane magic plus fire. Without arcane magic, there was no endurance, and the magic power would quickly run out. He didn't know what level his magic circuit was now, but the private goods that the Sun King had passed on to his precious son definitely couldn't be too bad. All right, young man, don't be greedy. Let's end it. The old man's voice came again in his trance. At this moment, Duque realized that he couldn't stop. A hole suddenly opened in the arcane circuit, and a new batch of mental power threads sprouted like bamboo shoots after a rain. Damn it, the old man cursed. In the next second, his voice was suddenly cut off, but the mental power that came from him didn't disappear. Duque didn't have the slightest idea. This wasn't what he thought. It seemed that the mental power that the Sun King had left in this notebook was to build the next huge magic circuit in one go. He suddenly knew why. Kale, that's. In the game, Kale, that's always had a few magic balls that were a mixture of arcane and fire floating above his head in an extremely flashy manner. That was not only a way for him to train his magic abilities, but also a way to store magic power. He then thought about how Kale, that's moves were mostly related to fire. Then, it wasn't difficult to guess that the Sun King's tactic was definitely the arcane fire, which was a dual element of arcane magic and fire. Since the arcane circuit was built, it naturally wouldn't allow Duque to give up halfway and not build the remaining flame circuit. Duque only felt that his mental power was burning like firewood. It was a feeling like his whole body was in a furnace. His skin was scorched by the high temperature, and even his hair seemed to be burnt. Every blood vessel in his body was no longer flowing with blood, but hot lava. The intense heat dominated his mind, making it impossible for him to suppress the manic feeling in his heart. I need to vent. I need to vent. Roar. Duque didn't know if he was roaring out loud. If he was not in the spiritual world but in reality, his roar would probably sound like some kind of violent ancient behemoth. There was no time to rest at all. It was as if he had just climbed up from the bottom of the Grand Canyon and was immediately asked to climb the peak of Mount Hygel. Chapter 53. Building the arcane circuits had consumed most of Duque's energy. Duque wanted to take a break, but he couldn't give it up. This was an all-out attack. If he failed this time, he didn't know how much he would have to pay and how much more torture he would have to endure before he could attack again. Gritting his teeth, he had to do it. At that moment, the magic power spurting out of the arcane circuits was like a geyser of oil, and every drop of power that spurted out was ignited and transformed into fire elements. Duque didn't know that at this moment, he had also caused great trouble for the old man. The fire elements that escaped from Duque seemed to have moved all the flames of Stormwind City and condensed them into the narrow room. There were so many fire elements in the room that almost all the combustible objects in the room were ignited. Old Man Norton was fine with his magic shield, but Duque and the chair he was sitting on, the coffee table, and even the walls were set ablaze. Unable to withstand the high temperature and pressure of the fire elements, all the glass windows in the room exploded instantly. Huge tongues of fire first rose into the air, and then countless fire elements poured down from the windows as if they had turned into liquid. There were as many waterfalls of fire as there were windows. The waterfalls of fire were like water, hitting the grass and instantly turning it into coke. A large amount of fire elements exploded, turning into huge misty fireballs. The fireballs exploded when they hit solid obstacles, sputtering countless flame arrows in all directions of the yard. Ah! Aitana, who was waiting outside the yard, let out a scream. Darnielle had already grabbed her the moment the window exploded, pulling her with him as he turned and ran. The torrent of flames that was more than a person's height almost burned their butts. Darnielle was so scared that he didn't even look back. He ran 2 houses away and didn't dare to stop until he was behind a mage's laboratory that had a magic shield. Flames overflowed around Old Man Norton's laboratory and spread over all the trees in the yard. With a crackling sound of wood burning and trees collapsing, Old Man Norton's entire yard was finished. Even the 4 yards of the other mages were involved in this vortex of destruction. The only good thing was that this was the experimental area of the academy. Most mages were little princes who were courting death. Regarding the mages' explosive experiments, it could be said that the academy already had a contingency plan. Only the yard was affected. Once the waves of fire touched the buildings, brilliant magic lights immediately lit up. The magic shield on the building was activated. They withstood the impact of the waves of fire very well. As a result, the waves of flames could only continue to advance through the gaps between the buildings, carrying a large amount of debris such as wood and soil. It's a bit like squeezing toothpaste. Originally, the range of the sea of fire was only a few dozen meters. However, due to the compression, the fire wall continued to push forward in all directions for more than 100 meters before it stopped. All the mages and apprentices in the Royal Magic Academy were alarmed. What the hell, who's ascending? Such exaggerated magic fluctuations. Is it Khadgar? No, it's not him. That's Norton's laboratory? Could it be? While the others were discussing, Darnielle and the others did not know. Still in a state of shock, they looked at the experimental area around them that had completely changed. Their mouths were wide open, but not a single word came out. All the roads and streets were charred black. Black charcoal dust blew everywhere. Half of the stone statues on the main road of the experimental area were smoked black. Did Duque do this? Aitana was still in shock. Probably. Darnielle did not dare to be sure. As the person involved, Duque's great undertaking of shaping the magic circuit was still ongoing. He only felt a loud boom in his mind. It was as if a huge and blazing power had exploded in an area of his mind that had never been touched by his consciousness. Like a mountain exploding, the flame power that despised Duque's mind for being too small opened up a space in Duque's mind. The flames exploded, and the countless exploding fireballs were actually wrapped in a large number of fiery red threads of mental power that represented flames. They shot out from the gap in the arcane circuit. It was like a proud emperor ordering his messengers to ride in circles. Wherever the horse went, it was his territory. It was the same for the thin thread of flame spiritual power. It was actually trying to make a bigger circle than the arcana circuit. What the hell, this is simply courting death. Duque's face turned green. In his ears, the system elf's warning kept ringing. Warning. Warning, the arcane energy in the host's body is not enough to complete the construction of the flame magic circuit. At this rate, the host's energy will be drained in 3 minutes and 57 seconds. All the mental power in the host's body will be exhausted, and he will die. Not to mention the system elf, even Duque was going crazy with anxiety. Is there any alternative? It was obvious that Duque had been tricked unintentionally. When Kale, was building his own arcane fire magic circuit, his situation was definitely different from Duque's. Even if he did not have the pure magic power of the Sunwell as a backup, as the Sun King's most valued heir, he definitely had other means of supplying magic power. But this was Stormwind City, and Duque did not know if there was a ley line or a source of magic power here. If he was caught off guard, it would definitely be too late. Is there any alternative? This was the second time Duque had asked. Scanning, protective measures detected, but require a password to activate. Host, do you want to enter the password now? Yes, try Kale, that's for me. Comparing the original handbook and translation, automatically converting the common language into High Elven. Testing password error, please re-enter. Sun King? Error. Sunwell? Sin Dorii? Sweetheart? High Elven Light? Error. 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 Still an error. Duque was about to go crazy. He was about to be drained dry, and he still had to foolishly test the password here? Sunstrider? Oh. Ashes. Duque tried more than 100 passwords in one go, and the results were all F*King wrong. Isn't there something that automatically inputs a large number of passwords and automatically tests the correctness? Host, you're talking about a simple password with 10 numbers from 0 to 9, A to Z, and all the symbols on the keyboard. The system can try to use high-speed password changing methods to hit this kind of password. But this is a password, and it's impossible to activate the protection program if you can't say the correct password. Yes, it seems that there must be a corresponding tone. F*CK. Do I still have to rely on the Sunwell? With his life hanging by a thread, Duque could not help but curse. F*CK. Do I still have to rely on the Sunwell? Congratulations, host, the password is correct. Duque's face was full of embarrassment. Chapter 54. Duque suddenly understood why. For the Sun King, if Kale, who was tall, rich, and handsome, could not create 2 magic circuits of arcane fire in one go despite being so well prepared, it could only mean that Kale, was useless, or that the idea of not using the Sunwell to construct a general magic circuit was not feasible. In a rage, it was only natural that the Sun King would say such a command. However, after the protective measures were triggered, Duque felt a headache coming on. Most of the time, flames were not gentle things. The Sun King's arcane fire represented not only brilliance, but also destruction and dominance. Of course, Duque hoped that with a shake of his body, the tortoise, the tyrannical aura of a king would erupt, and the power of heaven and earth would submit to him. However, the reality was, oh my God, the flame circuit was making a cameo appearance as a robber. If the main body was not enough, he would make up for it by robbing. There was no room for Duque and the system elf to refute at all. The flame circuit turned into the most ruthless robber. Countless tiny flame spiritual lines extended from the circuit and spread in all directions at high speed, rushing towards all places with magic energy. Pfft! Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. If he did not rob it, he would die. If he robbed it, he would at most slowly wipe his ass later. Duque gritted his teeth. Either he did not rob it, or he would rob the biggest one. Seeing how fierce the flame circuit was, how could an ordinary source of magic satisfy it? He knew very well that the homes of the little mages around him were like bank counters without much money, so Duque simply instructed it to extend its evil hand to the most valuable treasury in Duque's eyes. Mediva's Mage Tower. That's right, Mediva's real nest was indeed in Karazhan. However, as the court mage of Stormwind, Mediv also had a mage tower in Stormwind City as a foothold. Mediv was evil. Mediv was the boss. Defeat the boss and distribute the equipment. Wasn't that fair and just? Unknowingly, Duque was already a little crazy. He was completely unaware that he was in a state of lacking moral integrity. The side effect of lowering his moral bottom line had already affected him imperceptibly. Trespassing into another mage's mage tower without permission was equivalent to declaring war on that mage. I don't care. Taking the Sun King's magic circuit's secret book was already a bad deal. He was still in the midst of cultivation, yet he was attacking Mediva's magus tower. Ignore. If Sardras, the king of demons, really put aside his pride and refused to let Mediv be a good role model of a righteous elder, and refused to forgive Duque magnanimously, then Mediv, whose wizard tower was attacked, had every reason to kill Duque. So what? What does it have to do with me? As if possessed, Duque let the flame circuit attack Mediva's mage tower, which was 50 meters away. However, fate seemed to have played a joke on Duque. Originally, Duque was prepared to snatch it openly. At most, he would just change his face and run away. Who would have thought that the thin thread of spiritual power from his flame circuit would actually circle around Mediva's mage tower and leave? Furthermore, it had silently returned with a belly full of fat. It didn't trigger any of the mage tower's magic seals at all. What was going on? After calming down, Duque's curiosity was about to explode. The system elf said, "Host. After testing, the flame circuit has triggered the resonance of 38 magic jades and 112 magic yellow crystals. These magic gems seem to actively provide energy to the flame circuit without triggering the mage tower's magic protection." Duque was dumbfounded. Damn, that works. Duque knew that magic gem study was a unique subject in the world of Azeroth. Mages liked to store their excess magic power in a series of special gems that could store magic power. This was so that they could absorb the magic power from the gems at critical times and save their lives. This principle was the same as ordinary people storing dry rations in case of emergencies. The magic power stored in the gems would also slowly decay over time. This was a very long process, usually a few months. High-quality gems could store most of the magic power for years without dissipating. Host, after scanning, these gems seem to have elvish carvings on them. Duque understood. The Sun King, no, this should be a backdoor that the entire elven race had secretly left for their own people. If humans fell out with the elves at critical times, that would be terrible. Well, at least now there would be no evidence of him stealing all the magic rations stored in Mediv. Was stealing from an evil super boss counted as stealing? Of course not, this was enjoying the spoils of war. Needless to say, Duque really enjoyed the process of not defeating the boss but being able to share the spoils of war. All right. The proud and violent, flame magic, circuit was full, and it started working. Following the guidance of the mental strength in the flame magic circuit, a new circuit was rapidly forming in Duque's body. Like an iron chain, the two circuits, the flame circuit and the arcane circuit, were intertwined like a ring. The flame circuit was derived from the arcane circuit, but it was also very different from the arcane circuit. The arcane circuit was like the earth that carried all things, firm and thick. On the other hand, the flame circuit was like a house built on the ground. It was a typical superstructure. After the gentle magic power was transferred from the arcane circuit to the flame circuit, the magic power would circulate in the flame circuit at a faster speed than the arcane circuit. In the process, the magic power would be rapidly polarized and become more suitable for use in flame magic. System notification, flame circuit, completed. Congratulations, host, you have officially completed the creation of the arcane fire magic circuit. The host's magic ability has been greatly improved. From now on, the host's magic power consumption for using arcane magic is 65% of the theoretical value in the book, and the magic power consumption for flame magic is 80% of the theoretical value. The offensive magic damage of all arcane magic and flame magic will automatically be maximized. After inspection, because the magic power absorbed this time has only reached the minimum value to construct the flame magic circuit, there is still room for great improvement in this circuit. I hope the host will further improve it in the future. Because the host can now automatically absorb the free arcane magic and flame energy within a radius of 30 meters around the host, the simple formula for calculating the magic power is no longer applicable. The host will have to figure out the specific situation on his own. Your current mage level is a level 9 Earth Mage. After reading the notification in one breath, he looked at the two tightly intertwined magic circuits in his spiritual world. Duque found that, as the system notification said, the flame magic circuit was not perfect. Although the two rings were the same size, it was easy to see that in the arcane circuit, arcane energy was abundant. Countless arcane streams of light filled the entire circuit. In the flame circuit, only half of the space had the light of flames flowing through it. Chapter 55. Duque frowned. It seemed that this was all he could do for the time being. Duke didn't have much to complain about. He was lucky enough to complete the foundation even though he was blindly trying to do so. With the arcane fire circuit inherited from the High Elf King, Duque was already luckier than most mages. Duque slowly opened his eyes, and what came into view was old Norton, who was still in shock and hiding in the magic shield, even trembling a little. "You finished building your magic circuit?" the old man asked tentatively. "Yes. I'm afraid I'll have to call the elf Prince Kale, that's senior brother from now on," Duque said playfully. The old man almost fainted from fear. "Please, don't scare me. Learning the inheritance of the elves, no, the Elven King without permission will be very troublesome." "It's okay, the Sun King is very fast." Duque wanted to say that it wouldn't be long before the Sun King died, but he suddenly remembered that the secrets of heaven could not be revealed, so he shut his mouth. "What's wrong with the Sun King?" "Nothing. If this gets out of hand, the person who sent me the letter will take the blame." Duque didn't really want Aurelia to take the blame. He was thinking about how to further modify his magic circuit so that in the future, even if the Sun King stood in front of him, he wouldn't be able to see it. "Yes, where did you go to collect the magic power just now?" Duque looked at the dull magic power gems at the old man's feet and suddenly felt a heartache. The old man had even compensated him for the cost of his coffin in order for him to build the arcane circuit. Not wanting to implicate old Norton, Duque made a shushing gesture. "I went to borrow some from the Mediv." Unexpectedly, the old man cried out strangely, "Impossible. The Guardian has been missing since last Wednesday." Without any warning, he was neither in Stormwind nor back to Karazhan. Duke's heart skipped a beat, and started to beat wildly. Mediv is missing? Duque, who was familiar with the history of the world of Azeroth, knew what this meant. Medivh's disappearance was a major event for Stormwind and the entire world. While Mediv was missing, Sardras was no longer satisfied with hiding in the dark and secretly influencing Medivh's decisions. Sardras began to devour Medivh's soul. When Mediv reappeared in front of the people of Stormwind, he would trigger the most famous event in history, the Dark Portal, and bring the orcs into the world of Azeroth. This was also the beginning of a series of upheavals and apocalyptic crises in the world of Azeroth. At this moment, Duque finally felt that the seemingly stagnant wheel of history was still moving in an irreversible direction. Duque couldn't help but be speechless. "Okay, I admit that I took the mana from the mana crystal that Mediv put in the Mage Tower. But I didn't take it. It was the Sun King's backdoor." Duque told Norton about the backdoor that the Sun King had left with his mental power. The old man was both happy and shocked. He was happy that nothing would happen to him and Duque this time. He was shocked that the elves were not kind. They actually held back the mana gems that they had given to the humans. Seeing the old man's fear, Duque comforted the old man. "Don't worry, I have the Pearl Sea route now. At most, I'll go back and buy a batch of mana gems to compensate Mediv." It would be strange if he would compensate. The next time he saw Mediv, that guy would already be the boss of the Burning Legion. He didn't go and kill the boss, but gave the boss a gift? I'd be crazy to do this. Of course, Duque's move still comforted the old man very well. When Duque proposed to compensate the old man for the mana crystals, the old man refused. There's no need. I don't have any children. I've been studying arcane spells for most of my life. It wasn't until recently that I suddenly realized that I was really old that I remembered that I should accept a disciple. Although you're not my disciple in the real sense, I treat you as my last disciple. Itana might be better. She's expected to become a sky mage. But Darnielle will be lucky if he can become an earth mage in this lifetime. The old man put his hand on Duque's shoulder. I'll rely on you to help pass on my research. Duque's eyes couldn't help but turn red and moist. It was like a father giving birth to a son, and a son giving birth to a grandson. In the world of mages, inheritance was just like that. Many times, for the continuation of knowledge, many things were done without asking for anything in return. You don't have to be surprised. When you're old, you'll think the same. Alright, now that you have a very solid foundation, you can officially learn my arcane techniques from tomorrow onwards. Got it. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the room. It should be the guards and the mages on duty rushing over. Hey! Abela Norton, you old ghost, are you dead yet? If you're dead, just grunt. A rude shout came from outside the window. Flit, you're dead, but I'm not dead. Old man Norton roared back in annoyance. Very good. Then what about that little guy Duke Marcus? After a while, you'll be able to sit on the Sky Mage seat with him. Oh, damn it. I've lived my life in vain. Right, where should I send the bill? Here or at Marcus's? We've lost a lot this time. It can't be settled without a few thousand gold coins. At the mention of a few thousand gold coins, old man Norton's head shrank. Of course it'll be handled by that kid Marcus himself. Duque was tongue-tied. The gratitude he felt from the old man not needing him to pay for the crystals was gone. Hey! What happened to the mentor taking care of everything? Give me back my gratitude. Facing Duque's aggrieved gaze, old man Norton decisively changed the subject. Right. Your foundation in arcane magic has been built very well. Now it's time to strengthen your understanding of arcane magic. Starting tomorrow, you'll come to me to learn arcane magic techniques. Alright, I'll just treat it as tuition. After this day, the entire academy knew that Duque had advanced to a 9th grade earth mage. All the official mages looked at Duque differently. At first, Duque didn't understand. Later, it was the old man who told him that in the world of mages, only those who could truly form a magic circuit and continuously absorb the magic power drifting in the atmosphere would be recognized as true mages. The standard of being able to cast 3 level 1 spells was purely for the convenience of determining the boundary between a mage and an apprentice. In the following days, Duque focused on learning arcane magic techniques from Old Man Norton, which was metamagic abilities. It was different from the kind of special effects that could be obtained by simply adding points in games. In a situation where even the system elf couldn't analyze it, Duque could only be like a real apprentice, constantly using his own senses to perceive. Again and again, he repeated this in constant failure and practice. The number of failures was so many that Duque couldn't remember how many times he had failed. Finally, Duque succeeded. Arcane subtlety reduces your target's resistance to all your spells. The specific effect depends on whether you can grasp the target's weakness in actual combat. Arcane focus gives you a 10% chance of entering the energy-saving spellcasting state after casting any kind of damaging spell. The energy-saving spellcasting state can reduce the mana consumed by your next damaging spell by 100%. Arcane meditation allows you to maintain 15% mana recovery speed when casting spells. Just when Duque thought that his days of research would continue indefinitely, a magic imprint on his hand heated up. Chapter 56. Mage imprint communication was a simple means of magic communication. Anyone who knew magic could use it, but the distance of the communication depended on the spellcaster's magic cultivation. That night, Duque pretended to go to Storm Harbor to inspect the shipbuilding progress, and then came to a stone beach near the harbor. The rugged boulders hid everything well. Even if a ball was hidden here, it would not be easily seen by the naked eye. "Come out," Duque said lightly. "Master." Naga Walla stacked her arms on her shoulders and bowed to Duque. "What's the matter?" Walla went straight to the point. "The Grey Scale clan is here. They have already crossed the reef sea opposite Stranglethorn Vale, and tomorrow they will reach the sea opposite Dagger Ridge, the southernmost part of the western wilderness. I have ordered the old blind man, who is entrenched in the southwest of the wilderness and the lighthouse of the western wilderness, to evacuate with his clansmen. It is expected that they will arrive at our new camp when the sun rises the day after tomorrow. At the same level, a Naga could easily deal with 10 Murlocs. It was not only a problem of combat power, but also the natural coercion of high-ranking creatures over low-ranking creatures, which would make the Murlocs unable to exert 50% of their combat power. Rashly letting the Murlocs fight would only be courting death. Duque raised his chin slightly. "You did well." Walla bowed deeply and then said, "There's more. Congratulations on your promotion, Master. As soon as I came near Storm City, I could feel the surging magic from Master in the imprint." Duque was a little stunned, and then smiled. "You won't regret following me. You go back first, I will appear when the time comes." Walla nodded and bowed again, then turned around, swaying her long snake tail, and the green figure disappeared into the waves of the sea. Duque looked at Walla's back meaningfully. This female Naga should have held back. She might have been injured before, causing her strength to decline. Now that she had caught her breath, her strength had recovered a lot. It just so happened that Duque's magic circuit was formed. Duque didn't care about Walla's thoughts. Firstly, his imprint could tell Walla how strong or weak he was. Secondly, as long as Walla couldn't afford the price of betrayal, then she would always be loyal. Turning around, Duque went to look for Makarov. The next morning, before dawn, the fishermen were already preparing to go out to sea to fish. An important guest had arrived at the dock, the Earth magician, Duke Marcus. Makarov and a dozen mercenaries followed behind Duque. There was a high platform next to the report board at the dock. Usually, it was used to announce important events. Today, Duque's blue and white mage robe was so dazzling that many fishermen didn't even dare to look Duque in the eye. Makarov and his men were all dressed in brand new leather armor, with daggers tied to their waists and legs. It was the typical attire for naval warfare. Duque nodded slightly. Makarov stepped forward and shouted to the fishermen, "Now, the owner of the Pearl Route, a member of the royal family's mages, the Earth magician Duke Marcus has a slightly dangerous business to do." "Slightly dangerous? Big business? Looking for us fishermen?" The fishermen were a little surprised, but also a little excited. The Pearl Route's cargo ships entered and left the port almost every day under their noses. Those who were hired were all newbies who didn't have a ship, but now those fellows were paid twice the wages of ordinary sailors. Just by sailing the ship for a 2-day round trip, one or two of them had already made a fortune. There were no Murlocs, no Naga, no sea beasts, and they were earning a salary that the fishermen were extremely envious of. They were often reprimanded by their families for not catching up to the good times and making their first bucket of gold in the Pearl Route. The more peaceful the era, the easier it was to stimulate people's risk-taking genes. Looking at the two mercenaries beside Makarov carrying a large chest of gold coins, the fisherman's eyes were worth it. There was surprise, but also joy. The surprise was that the fisherman's wages were definitely not worth the gold coins. The joy was that this was definitely a big business. Makarov continued to shout with a slightly hoarse voice, "Rest assured, Sir Marcus is not asking you to do some pirate business. Now, a group of Naga is about to attack Sir Marcus's warehouse. Sir Marcus wants you to sink your old fishing boat to a designated place and catch those damned Naga in one fell swoop. In exchange, Sir Marcus will compensate you with a brand new fishing boat of the same size, or directly buy it for 500 gold coins. Every fisherman who takes the risk to sink their boat will be compensated with 2 gold coins. In the case of misfortune, it will be 10 gold coins. Everyone can get gold coins before setting sail. At this time, the bare-chested old man Jackson went on stage. Sir Marcus has ordered an additional 40 boats from me. The money for the shipbuilding will be paid in advance. You can get any kind of fishing boat you want from me. Old Jackson's words were more convincing than Makarov's. A fisherman was tempted. He asked in a trembling voice, "We only need to sink the old fishing boat to a designated place, then swim away, and we can get a new boat and get the bounty?" "Yes. Sir Marcus will personally take care of those hateful Naga, while our mercenary group will take everyone back to Storm Port on the boat in the back." "All right, now Sir Marcus needs 10 fishing boats, who will come?" With a great reward, there were bound to be brave men. On average, a fisherman would get 2 or 3 silver coins for a trip to the sea. Besides, was there no risk in going to the sea? Nowadays, fishermen were accompanied by danger all day long. Even in the coastal waters, there were still huge sharks, fishmen, and a mess of sea monsters. Therefore, let alone 10 gold coins, even if it was 1 gold coin, many people would still be willing. Me. Mine. I've wanted to replace that broken boat for a long time. Vara did not know what was going on in Storm City. The female Naga leader only knew that she was in big trouble. With Duque's support, she had gathered half of the fishmen clans in the western wilderness as her subordinates. Now, half of the shallow bay was filled with those noisy fishmen, no less than 2,000 of them. At a glance, such an astonishing number was enough to take down a human town. But Vara knew very well that unless Duque was here, these fishmen were a bunch of weaklings who could only fight with the wind. A male Naga with a long scar on the left side of his face, extending from his forehead to the corner of his mouth, and even blind in his left eye, came over with a huge trident with a blade wider than a human body. "High Priest, the latest news has come. This time, Grayscale has nearly 400 Nagas, and has also commanded more than 3,000 fishmen. We say no more." Chapter 57. It was another dawn. The vast surface of the sea was suffused with a blue radiance. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that there were many strange figures swimming at high speed in the clear shallow sea. Like a school of migrating fish attracted by the intersection of cold and warm ocean currents, countless murlocs the size of trolleys began to attack a bay in the northern part of the western wilderness. The bay was not big. The crescent-shaped entrance was about 60 meters wide. Once one entered, one would enter the shallow water area with a depth of less than 2 meters. If this place was not filled with murlocs that had no sense of beauty at all, it might be a perfect beach. The huge murlocs were like a black tide, surging at the entrance of the bay, dyeing the entire outside of the bay. At the entrance of the bay, a male Naga swam in. His huge snake tail swayed in the waves, supporting his majestic upper body above the water surface. Waving a trident, the strong male Naga with gray scales shouted arrogantly, "Seeing that we are also from Queen Azhara, hand over the baby and the human who killed our chief warrior. The Grayscale clan will give you a chance to put down your weapons and surrender. This is the territory of the 100-handed death god Hugard. If the Grayscale clan does not want to be exterminated, get lost." Vara raised his scepter high and shouted at the other party. The male Naga showed a sarcastic expression. He shook his head as if he knew this would happen. His figure disappeared into the water. Is that human so reliable? The one-eyed male Naga beside Vara could not help but ask. No, I'm just tired of running, and I don't want to surrender. Vara turned his head and looked at his most loyal subordinate with his greenish-brown eyes. He then glanced at the newly built nest. Gennard, if the battle is not going well, take them and leave. They are our last hope. The male Naga called Gennard seemed to be reluctant, but he nodded heavily in the end. Understood. In the distance, there was a continuous sound of water splashing, like boiling water. The black color outside the bay dyed the mouth of the bay at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, accompanied by a series of strange squeaks unique to murlocs, the army of murlocs charged to the edge of the beach in the blink of an eye. The surging momentum was like a huge wave hitting the shore. It was very frightening. Unfortunately, the raging waves beating the shore only had momentum. The merfolk's huge wave was shattered by a different kind of shore. Throw the axe. Over 1,000 simple short axes spun in a wondrous manner from high up on the shore. It was as if a sudden heavy rain had poured down, almost instantly extinguishing the morale of the attacking murlocs that had just been stirred up. Skinning axe. Duque had obtained the blueprint from Hogg. This was the simplest kind of axe. It was made by tying a sharp stone that could be seen everywhere on the beach to a wooden stick with a thick rope. For humans, unless they were primitive people, no one would use such a crude battle axe. But for the slightly retarded murlocs, this was the best throwing weapon. The long-range attacks easily crushed the morale of the attacking fishmen. The group of fellows turned around and fled at a speed even faster than when they came. For a moment, the battle formation was in chaos. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Vara raised his scepter, and all the defending murlocs jumped into the sea one after another, fighting with the murlocs who were trying to escape. If it was a brilliant commander paired with strictly disciplined soldiers, they might be able to use the terrain to repeatedly consume the opposite side's forces, but the murlocs, well, that was the case with their retardation. Anyway, one side had to escape, and the other side had to chase, so at least there would be some results. But as the Grayscale clan became ruthless and threw a large number of male Nagas into the battlefield, the situation developed in a direction that was not favorable to the furious Scale clan. The male Nagas had burly bodies comparable to trolls. When they stood up, they were easily more than 2 meters tall. Even on land, without 3 or 5 Stormwind City soldiers, they would not be able to handle them. Where there was water, they were even better at hand-to-hand combat. They waved their huge tridents, as if they were chopping melons and vegetables, easily chopping the murlocs who dared to come forward on the furious Scale clan's side into minced meat. After a few tests, the murlocs only dared to use the skinning axe and the murloc wise's frost arrows for long-range attacks. But the effect was not great. As an aquatic race, the male Naga had good ice magic resistance and extremely thick scales. Wrapped around the explosive muscles were fish scales that were comparable to armor. The murlocs' attacks could hardly hurt them at all. At this time, a female Naga with gray scales all over her body appeared in the bay. Vara, I'll give you one last chance, kneel under my tail. The Naga siren who has the ability to cast spells should not die so easily. I refuse, then you can die. I will find your young females and teach them well. Ha 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 ha. The Naga clan was a matriarchal clan, and the females who had the ability to cast spells were the masters. The strength of a Naga clan was often not measured by the size of the population, nor by the number of slaves, but by the number of female Naga who had the ability to cast spells. If there were not enough females in their own clan, they would rob other families' female cubs, and then cultivate them into helpers of their own clan. This was the way the Naga clan survived and expanded. Come on. Vara was furious. One of her arms held the scepter, and the other 2 suddenly pulled out 4 sharp scimitars from the scabbards behind her waist. Those were exquisite weapons that should not have come from the Naga clan. The cold light of the scimitars was reflected in the sparkling light, and the warriors of the Grey Scale clan could not help but be stunned. Those were expensive weapons from the Iron Stove Castle's dwarf craftsmen. When Duque arrived, the battle had entered the most intense stage. More than half of the Grey Scale clan had attacked the beach. On the beach, Vara was besieged by dozens of male Naga. Almost every moment, there were more than 10 tridents slashing at Vara, but Vara took advantage of the small gap between the different movements of the male Naga to fiercely counterattack. Every time when it was about to be hit, Vara's slightly slender upper body, with the support of the coiled snake-like lower body, swayed at high speed like a roly-poly doll, and dodged the fatal attacks in an instant. The scepter kept releasing chilling ice arrows, knocking down the male Naga one by one. The 4 ferocious scimitars released a continuous stream of blade light, chopping off one thick arm after another. Her movements were so fast that she even pulled out a faint afterimage. She was so fierce, but still could not stop the balance of victory from tipping in the Grayscale clan's favor. Because the opponent's priest had not yet made a move. At this time, a clear male voice suddenly came from the mouth of the bay. "I heard that you can farm monsters here. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."